Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 163 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor, show by show, from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. I'm joined, as always, by the co-host, Matt Feuerstein. And Matt, do you ever have a thing in your life where you know you did the right thing, but you still kind of have regrets? I have that with this episode because I can explain where...
I think I have like, do you just regret this entire past 9 years that we've spent doing this? Is that the regret?
Matt, I regret everything I've ever done. So that's part of it. On the list of things I've done that I regret, this would be low on the list.
Okay,
so, you know,
I'll take it.
But you know, we do a thing where it's a chronological Ring of Honor podcast, as the opener lets you know. And so every episode corresponds to that show. So like when we did episode 100, that was ROH's 100th show and so on. So when we did the Bryan Danielson special in the last couple of years, I told you, like, how about we don't number that? Like, let's leave that as a special. I like the idea of it being a standalone special, but most importantly, I didn't want to skew the numbering so that the show didn't coincide with the official show of ROH. So like tonight's episode 163, we're covering the 163 official ROH show. Now, Matt, I'm sure we made the right decision, but I have one regret because I did not know this until today or yesterday, but I was looking at social media. Today, Matt, the day we are recording this episode is the 30th anniversary of the Nintendo 64. We could have had episode 164 on the anniversary of the N64, but we don't. This is 163.
You know, I thought you were going to say something that I might agree with, but this one is this one's all you, baby. Not that I have anything against the Nintendo 64. I did play it, although I was more of a PlayStation guy. Gonna have to admit it. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, you know what it's like. But
you sound like someone that would have been on one of those edgy 90s video game commercials. Like, you would have been wearing a backwards cap and they just cut to you, you know, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. You know what it's like.
Well, that is who I am.
Goes to neon swipes and things.
You should picture me like that right now.
But cut to an ad for Stride X medicated pads.
Yes, but no, I mean, I'm fine with not having our episode numbers have anything to do with the Nintendo 64.
Well, Matt, we have a big show today, but before we get to that, I have a couple things. One thing that I think will make you chuckle and is fun, and another thing that should be fun, but is not. So this came to my attention yesterday thanks to friend of the show, Tom Feely, and he let us know. I don't know if you've checked Blue Sky recently, Matt, but
I did not. So sorry, Tom, but I did not check.
Another great person on the wrestling internet, another great Tom, so many great Toms out there, not that Tom Green on Blue Sky. He does this thing where he, you know, does like why you should know this person. He does these quick little minute.
I did see this.
Yes, and he did one on Matt Thompson. And for people that are longtime Through the Years listeners, you will know that Matt Thompson's kind of legendary to this show as a wrestler who showed up on one Ring of Honor show, green as grass. Apparently, Tom Green pointed out that I think that was like one of his first 5 matches. But he was like 6'8", could do really crazy athletic flying. And you and I were like, we've never seen this guy before. We've never seen him since. It's crazy that he shows up for one show, that he didn't get like a WWE development deal out of this. Whatever happened to him? We didn't get word. Tom,
by the way, we even asked Gabe Sapolsky what happened to him, and he didn't even know.
Yeah, and Tom has done a little video on Blue Sky about it. He also has a Twitter feed, Tom Green, but I believe for some reason I could only find it on his Blue Sky feed. But he did like this minute look back, and
yeah, I saw it on a YouTube short, so that's another way you could watch.
See, these guys are all over the place. They really know how to get out there. But so, well, you can find us on YouTube too. Anyway, so yeah, he has this little video of Matt Thompson where he talks about the basic, you know, what I just said about Matt Thompson. And then it turns out he did sporadically wrestle on other indies. So you can see Matt Thompson being like older with gray in his beard, working more modern indies, which was a trip. And then he reveals that last year he was arrested on suspicion of possession of child porn. So it should have been a fun story. It should have been a story that another ROH mystery solved. I guess it still is.
Yeah, so keep in mind when we were doing our fun little mentions of Matt Thompson, this was, I don't know, 2017, 2018, close to a decade before this arrest happened. Just to be clear.
And I've been doing for my Patreon lately a series of like look back articles, like look back at different years of the 90s. And I will say this: those articles have given me a lot of reason to go, whatever happened to this wrestler? Whatever happened to this wrestler? Matt, I will say a shocking number of times when you wonder what happened to a wrestler that no one's heard of in 10 to 15 years, it was they were arrested for child porn.
Oh, no.
Like more than a couple. It removes some of your faith in humanity. It's insane.
On the other hand, if you had any faith in humanity related to professional wrestlers, you probably should not have had faith in humanity.
So, now maybe we can brighten things up, Matt, because what brightens things up better than the Age of the Fall? And this is something I wanted to just do on its own thing. So, during the show we're going to cover today, they do a little graphic when the Age of the Fall first pop up that says, visit www.ageofthefall.com. I don't think it tells you to visit, just names the website, the web address. And I remembered, oh yeah, they did have for like over a year a website with a regularly updated blog that I believe that the future Seth Rollins wrote. And I felt like we've never covered that, and I do not want this to become a regular feature of this thing. But I thought, you know what? For fans that didn't come up through the time, we should to get a little bit of local flavor, of the day. Let's read one time. So I thought I'm going to open this. I'm not going to pick a corresponding date to the night show. I'm going to pick just a random one and read it. Matt, on last episode, we had great fun talking about all the different things that the Vulture Squad was and wasn't. And you determined that they were in fact birds. And you were greatly amused by that, as was I, but you really made sure we knew that. And Matt, imagine if days after that episode, I randomly picked this Age of the Fall blog. Imagine my delight. So I'm going to start reading it. This is again, I randomly picked this one. Feeble souls have taken their toll on my conscience. I feel obliged to respond. We are not birds. We are not in a nest. That's how it starts. We are not birds. And then like 2 days after you keep talking about this is not some psychobabble construed by years of pills and failure to confront abandonment issues. I am not a prophet, nor will I claim to be your savior, your messiah, or your martyr. Simultaneously, I won't sit here and tell you that we are all the same, that we are all scum, created equal, or worthless. I'm not a movie line, nor a cardboard cutout. It makes sense to me, though, that the majority of the skeptics who have brought themselves here merely take a few seconds to skim across these words in hopes of finding a phrase or a paragraph they can mock and dispel, which I will say, fair, you got me. Because the truth is, the same as we all believe in something or nothing, we have to withhold some disbelief, because if we didn't, then faith would be nothing more than a fleeting wretch. Oh wait, it already fucking is. The Age of the Fall is a generation of middle-of-the-road motherfuckers with a chip on our shoulder. Our army outnumbers any the world has ever seen.
What?
We all have different pasts, and if there's no action now, we will all end up with the same stagnant, dire future. Blame capitalism, blame democracy, or even blame your mother and father. I don't give a fuck. But when you wake up tomorrow, your breakfast tastes like shit, and your entire day is spent wondering who you could fuck or kill, remember that self-worth is often overlooked or ignored. If you haven't already, ask yourself, is this where I want to be? Is this who I want to be? When you get a real answer from your conditioned to avoid brain, come back and tell me how you feel. No, really. Come back. Tear down your own preconceptions and remove your fashionable fucking labels. Now figure out what side of the line you are on. There is no right answer, no wrong answer. Just a way back in or the way out.
So wait, Tyler Black wrote that?
I think Tyler Black was the guy that generally wrote those.
Man, his talents have been just completely wasted by WWE, haven't they?
I love like the edgy fence. There's so many points in that article where it's like, believe in nothing or everything. I don't care. It could be right. It could be wrong. It's up to you to decide.
Well, when he kept talking about how they weren't birds and all the other things they weren't, I was hoping he would throw in, "I'm not an avalanche."
I'm not a shark. I'm a human being.
I'm a man.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that was very impressive ability to say a lot while saying less than nothing.
Exactly. It is, which, if that was the point, I guess I can respect it in a weird way, but I feel like I don't know if that was the point. It just, like, Seinfeld was the show about nothing. I think Age of the Fall was the stable about nothing. There really is no meaning. When you scratch beneath the surface, there's nothing underneath. So, let's go to the show we're covering today. It's a big one, and that's Undeniable, which took place October 6, 2007 at the Inman Sports Complex in Edison, New Jersey, in front of a reported crowd of 800 fans. And if you're wondering at home, guys, we just covered an ROH pay-per-view 2 shows ago. What are you doing? Well, ROH taped another pay-per-view 2 shows after the last pay-per-view, and they take this one well ahead. In fact, even though the show took place October 6th, it premiered about 3.5 months later on, I think, January 18th.
So this is like a combination of This Tuesday in Texas and WCW Worldwide from 1993. in that it happens immediately after the last pay-per-view, but is also shown months after it's recorded.
Like, imagine fans today that are used to, like, the instant gratification of everything streaming live, or if not, like, next day, and the idea of, there's a world title change, and you're going to have to wait almost 3.5 months to even get the chance to see it. Like, yeah,
for fans that, I guess, we're used to buying DVDs a couple months later, it's not that much longer than it normally is, but yeah, it is crazy in today's mindset to think about that. It's interesting that they decided to do that, because they had so much time before they had to film another pay-per-view, but I don't know if it was like, I guess maybe you have some info on this. I don't know if it was like, well, we don't have much left to do with Nigel, so he has to win the title now, or Morishima is not going to be full-time after this, although he did come back for the Glory by Honor weekend, so theoretically they could have done it then.
I'm not sure, or they didn't necessarily have to do the world title change on pay-per-view, but I don't know exactly why they did it earlier. We will get into a thing later on the show about what this show could have been, but there are a couple before we get into reviewing the show, notes about this event. The first is a match we could have had in the pay-per-view. We'll go to Dave Meltzer at The Observer. He wrote at the time, a match that was never announced but was planned for this show was Bryan Danielson versus Mike Quackenbush. But Quackenbush was injured in the Ted Petty tournament for IWA Mid-South and is off the show. So that would have been interesting if they ran back Quack and Danielson a second time, and that would have been interesting too, because Quack was pretty much not really working on ROH by this point. So that would have been a match not like to build for the future. That would have been solely like, let's put on a really cool Bryan Danielson match for the pay-per-view crowd.
Yeah, although the match that they had at Death Before Dishonor was good, but it wasn't like the kind of match that everyone would be talking about on a pay-per-view for months. So I don't know if maybe they would have worked a different style of match also if it was on pay-per-view. Who knows?
Yeah. And we've had a few pay-per-views at this point, and Gabe Sapolsky made a comment to the Pro Wrestling Torch at this time. He wrote, Sapolsky says he hasn't made any significant changes to his approach to booking since ROH made the move to pay-per-view. Quote, there really haven't been any significant changes, he says. It is just a matter of balancing when things are taped and when they are going to air. And I will say, I thought it was interesting that this was the show he made that quote about, because we'll get into, I feel like this is the first pay-per-view where the crack show of things can get kind of weird when you're taping this far in advance and taping things out of order of airing. And all the other shows, I think he did a really deft job of doing it. And this is the one where it was like, you're getting into some troubles here. But
also that directly contradicts what he has said in later interviews, right? About how the pay-per-views mess with his booking rhythms.
Well, even like the reports when we watched the Respect Is Earned, the first ROH pay-per-view, that show had, matches that felt in some ways big, but like there was nothing of real storyline significance given away, like no big title matches or anything. And I remember the reporting around that time was that ROH didn't want to give that away on pay-per-views. And now by this point, they're doing world title changes on pay-per-views. So like clearly his thought has changed already at this point about what a pay-per-view for the company should be.
Yep.
Wade Keller. One nice thing about the ROH pay-per-views is that they were one of the rare shows that all the major newsletters would do a full in-depth coverage of. So we're going to have comments throughout the show from Wade at the ThROH, Dave at the Observer, Brian Alvarez at Figure 4, and even a couple comments from Mike Johnson. And Wade had a comment here. I love this comment because it really dates you right back to when this aired, early 2008. So Wade wrote about we'll get into more match-specific comments as they happen, but this is some more of his overall thoughts. He wrote, "The announcing was really strong. Prazak and Leonard both bring so much passion and knowledge to the product, and it's directed really well towards building backstories for the characters and announcers that they enhance the show. They are professional enough, as Barack Obama might say, but also casual enough to stick with ROH's theme of not being some slick production, but a wrestling organization by and for fans of the sport at its purest." Did I mention how? First off, I'll get into his next part of the quote in a second. But I just thought that takes me back.
Do you remember? Do you remember what that reference was for?
That was when he was talking about John McCain, right?
It was in a primary.
Hillary, right?
Hillary Clinton, yeah. When they mentioned her likability in a debate, and Barack goes, "You're likable enough, Hillary." Yeah. And that guy, some controversy at the time as being condescending.
Remember when that was a political controversy? Oh, the days.
Yeah.
But Wade continues. Did I mention how much the crowd helps these events? Their passion for the product and knowledge of each of the characters elevates the show so much. A good crowd is vital to a great pay-per-view, and ROH fans are every bit as good as the ECW fans of the mid-90s. Minus the know-it-all, we are the show tendencies that are an offsetting factor with ECW, that was an offsetting factor with ECW at times. Now,
I think critics of ROH audiences would say that was also an offsetting factor of ROH at many times.
Well, I like that because I'm going to juxtapose it with this comment from Mike Johnson, a PW Insider, who really came of age being a regular at the ECW shows. And, he's been on ECW documentaries and stuff because he was so entrenched with the company. And so he was attending ROH Undeniable. And I like to juxtapose Wade's compliment and saying, well, they're not like ECW crowds. This was what Mike Johnson said about this show, and he was attending it. Mike Johnson says, "The only downside to this night in any way was that the live crowd was perhaps the most vulgar audience in the history of ROH, both in terms of lewd chants and in being an inside smart-ass audience trying to screw around. It was somewhat frustrating to the company in that they are trying to expand to a new audience, and they don't want to turn off any new prospective fans, especially since they very rarely ever use expletives in their in-ring product or promos." So I love that on one hand, Wade's like, man, this crowd is so great. It's not like ECW. And Mike Johnson is like, this is the worst ROH crowd ever. The company was frustrated with them.
That's very funny. For the record, I was also in attendance at Undeniable, although we are getting close to the era where I stopped going to shows outside of New York City. I would say maybe there's 2 more non-New York City shows that I attend after this, and all the rest are only within New York City.
You can only tell so much with crowd miking, and I imagine you probably won't remember your distinct experience, but I didn't hear anything watching the show that made me think, oh, this crowd was being like real smartasses more than any other indie wrestling show. But maybe, again, if you were entrenched in the crowd, you would have heard conversations and chants that we can't hear over the DVD sound quality. But
I went to a lot of ROH shows where I did think that about the crowd, but I don't remember this one standing out as being particularly egregious.
There will be a very famous, coming up in a few shows, example of an ROH crowd being insensitive and ECW-like. That is very well remembered, and it is not this show. But it is far worse than anything I think that happens here. And then finally, one last note. Mike Johnson also pointed this out, which you will notice if you watch the show. He wrote, ROH handed out rally towels to the first several hundred fans that entered the venue, which was said to have worked out well on camera. ROH's Gabe Sapolsky got the idea for the rally towels while attending the Philadelphia Phillies chase for the postseason. So yeah, if you watch the show starts with a whole bunch of fans are waving these white towels with the ROH logo on them. Matt, did you get an ROH rally towel?
No, because I was always GA, because I'm a man of the people and like to, hang out standing in the back. And so I wasn't going to get in line early enough to get a towel. So no, I don't have one. Although, fun fact, speaking of towels, rally towels, I did, I was cleaning out my apartment because I'm moving, and I found a old towel from that said Knicks playoffs 2012. So
Wow.
I could show everyone that and be like, I'm a true Knicks fan because I went to the playoffs when they only won one playoff game in 2012 against the Miami Heat when LeBron was on the Heat, and I could say that I was a real OG Knicks fan, but don't tell anybody. Only Tom Feely knows that I actually only went to that game because he had extra tickets. But shh.
I was about to say, you were a real fan, and then you completely destroyed my ability to give you props.
Yes. I mean, I would say I was more of a real fan in the 90s when I was growing up. I wasn't actually genuinely a big Knicks fan then. But by 2012, I was kind of living vicariously through Tom, who we've mentioned previously, Tom Feely, who was my roommate back then. He was a true Knicks fan, and is a true Knicks fan, I will say.
And so... Oh, so I'll check out Tom Feely. I don't know if he still does it, but he great recaps. I mean, not recaps, but previews of all the UFCs at SureDog.com. If you're a fight fan, Tom Feely is your man. So, dark match on the pre-show. We did not get to see this. Alex Payne and Ernie Osiris defeated Mitch Franklin and Rhett Titus in your typical students pre-show match. And now we open the pay-per-view. We open with Dave Prazak, Lenny Leonard, and Claudio Castagnoli in the ring in front of a rabid crowd that was clearly told to make some noise because, hey, we're about to start recording the pay-per-view. The fans are all waving their little ROH rally towels.
I actually think it was cool. Like, it had a good effect. I think it was a nice little idea for this event.
Yeah.
That said, I thought that, when this first appeared on camera, this is not a great looking venue for a pay-per-view.
No, I would say this one, like the Chicago one looked not great, but I feel like we're going down, from New York to we're going downward in markets.
Definitely.
But not that there's anything against New Jersey. I love The Sopranos. that's my one New Jersey. I love Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, see,
Kevin Smith. Okay,
I like a lot of musicians from New Jersey. Actually, if I really want to get to it, but I'm not going to right now.
I would be willing to try a Taylor ham sandwich. So anyway.
I think some folks in New Jersey would call it a pork roll, but I don't remember which part of Jersey says which, so I'm not going to get involved in that debate.
Pork roll, egg and cheese on a Kaiser roll. Anyway, Prazak welcomes us to Ring of Honor, where we'll find that the heart, the passion, the skill of ROH athletes is undeniable. So he's doing the thing he did before, which you really gotta put that show title into your announcement. Prazak mentions that Morishima will defend the world title against Nigel McGuinness tonight.
I wish that they had named it Wrestle Rave, because then they would have had to work that into the opening.
You will truly find that going to an ROH event is like a rave, except no one's getting high and there's
I think what they would actually say is this show is going to get Wrestle Rave reviews. Thank you.
So, Morishima's mentioned when he gets brought up gets boos. Nigel's gets cheers. We get quick cutaways to both men in their locker rooms as Prazak speaks. Lenny says, if you want to talk about undeniable, the intensity of Claudio Castagnoli is undeniable. He's ready for his match against Chris Hero. So let's get that started right away, right now. At that point, Larry Sweeney, Chris Hero, Sarah Del Rey, and Bobby Dempsey come out. Larry says Hero is unhappy with the terms of his match, and it will not happen tonight. Larry says that they're holding out until they get exactly what they want. The crowd chants for Bobby Dempsey as Sweeney gloats that because Claudio signed a contract to wrestle Hero and only Chris Hero tonight, he's done for the night and off the pay-per-view. Sweeney tells the stable, get back in the limo. The holdout is on. We have a lot of negotiation to do. Prazak says, well, we're going to have to find another match, so let's go to the opening. And at that point, we get a music video showing highlights from the Man Up pay-per-view as the Smashing Pumpkins song Doomsday Clock plays, which I guess modern wrestling fans might know as the theme for Voices of Wrestling. They might go, what that's? I wonder if some wrestling fans know it more as that than as a song from a latter day stage Smashing Pumpkins record. But PW Torch wrote about this. Rock band Smashing Pumpkins signed with ROH to deliver the soundtrack to the Undeniable pay-per-view, which debuted on January 18th. Quote, as a longtime fan of Ring of Honor, I am thrilled that our song Doomsday Clock has been chosen to be the theme music for the newest pay-per-view, Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan said on ROH's website. To me, the highlight video captures the intensity, passion, and stark ambition that is at the core of this groundbreaking promotion.
I was like, what was he calling Brown? I was like, what is going on here? But okay, groundbreaking makes more sense.
Yeah, and then Wade adds, the use of the latest Smashing Pumpkins music added a touch of contemporary flavor, a definite step up from the generic public domain music that they might have to otherwise have to resort to, which I will say, up to this point, ROH had been doing licensed music for a lot of these pay-per-views, and I think the next show they use they license a Slayer song for.
Also, I don't know if Smashing Pumpkins in 2007 brings a contemporary flavor, but that's another story.
Yeah, we're like post '90s run. I mean, it's as far as like second stage Smashing Pumpkins, it's not a bad album actually, but
never heard the album, but I mean the song is fine. I had nothing against it.
So yeah, we cut back to the building. The Age of the Fall of Jimmy Jacobs, Tyler Black, Necro Butcher, and Lacey are in the ring. Jimmy says that there still seems to be some confusion about who the Age of the Fall is and why they're here. All of a sudden, the web address ageofthefall.com is shown on the screen, which is a tremendous blog post. Jacob says they're not a wrestling faction. They're not an invasion. They're a revolution whose ideals reach far beyond this wrestling ring. They need to spread their message, and to do that, they need power. And power comes with the tag team titles,
which continues to be hilarious. That power comes with the tag team titles.
Exactly, which is why we targeted ROH's favorite sons, the Briscoes. We get big Briscoes chants at their mention. Jimmy says that they'd like to get their hands on the Briscoes, but the people that run this place say they need to beat some tag teams first, so they'll work within your little system, but they'll destroy it from the inside out. So any tag team that wants to be their first stepping stone, bring it on, sunshine. And out comes the Vulture Squad of Jack Evans, Ruckus, and Jigsaw with Julie Smokes, who makes the Vulture sounds, introduces his team, shouts transform. The match is on. This was almost the exact same promo Jimmy cut the night before. I didn't like it then. I don't like it now. Gabe trying to do a bit of a more frenetic, almost ECW style thing of like, oh, this match isn't happening, so this match is impromptu, and, we're trying to build characters we're trying to build the Larry Sweeney character by making him the reason why this match isn't happening, and, a couple of comments, and then if you have any thoughts about it. Dave wrote in The Observer, I'm just reading this part for the one Dave line. Dave wrote, they opened with Claudio Castagnoli in the ring for a match with Chris Hero. However, Larry Sweeney came out and refused to allow Hero to wrestle until more money was offered. It would end up with Jimmy Jacobs of the Age of the Fall coming out and doing a weird interview. Just like that's all he says. This weird interview. But who was a fan of this, Matt? Was Wade Keller. Because all of the mic work was good on the show. Sweeney, Jacobs, and Pierce were especially good in their roles and their extended in-ring promos. Nigel was great in this context, too. So,
I mean, I agree with him about some of what he just said. But, yeah, the Jacobs stuff it just seems bad. Certainly in 2026 eyes. I don't remember really how I felt about it back then, if I'm being honest. But it just seems like so childish by the standards of what I would look for now. And I know you mentioned that, this is like kind of an ECW style opening where like Claudio comes out, but he can't wrestle, so we have to do an impromptu thing. And then the Age of the Fall come out and do a challenge. I don't know. Call me old fashioned, but I like the idea of a pay-per-view where it's like a bunch of big matches that are set up to watch that you've been excited for, as opposed to just like trying to be like a 1999 ECW on TNN type of booked show. Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe it came off better back then when like you realized ROH had to do something a little bit different to stand out, as opposed to what like WWE and TNA were doing every month on pay-per-view.
I mean, we've talked recently about how much Gabe was trying to tinker with different ways of presenting the shows in 2007, and in some ways it's been a little bit discombobulating, and a lot of what he's tried hasn't worked, at least to a great degree. But I will say, give him some credit too. He's not like he's trying stuff. 5 years in,
he's certainly trying stuff. That's for sure.
Yeah. Is it all great stuff? No, but even like with the rally towels, like just the idea of, oh, I saw this. How about we try that for the show? Like and I'm sure that cost them a few dollars to print up probably 200 or 300 rally towels with the ROH logo on them, and so they're making efforts to try and set each show apart and do things, but So our first match we get to see on the pay-per-view is the Age of the Fall of Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black defeating the Vulture Squad of Jack Evans and Ruckus in 5 minutes, 37 seconds when Jacobs made Evans tap out to the end time. Matt, before I throw it to you, we'll get one of our first examples of this pay-per-view just being out of sync, because Dave Prazak on commentary as the match starts says that after what happened at Man Up, ROH management doesn't even want to have the Briscoes and the Age of the Fall in the same building as each other. So later on the pay-per-view they'll be airing a Briscoes match that took place in Dayton. So far, ROH has been good about managing the pay-per-view and DVD timelines, but this show is slipping a bit because you have Jimmy saying tonight starts their tag run when they had a tag match the night before on, the DVD exclusive show, and you have the announcer saying management doesn't want the Briscoes in the same building as Age of the Fall one night after a show where they were in the same building together, brawling each other even. And as we'll see later, anyone that buys the DVD version of the show will realize that Prazak is not even telling the truth about the Briscoes and Age of the Fall not being in the same building tonight. So
yeah, it's a little bit like intelligence insulting when, as if you're watching the DVD version, like they're saying they can't be in the same building, then they have a match against each other later, and they never acknowledge what he had said earlier. Like, yeah. I can't decide if this is just like, okay, it's kayfabe, it's wrestling, we all know like that we have to do this stuff, or if it's too much of an insult to the intelligence of the audience. I can't tell what I think.
Well, it's interesting because they will also do later, because like for people that are just tuning into this episode and any episode could be someone's first. These pay-per-views would be 2-hour pay-per-views, but then ROH would shoot like an extra hour worth of stuff. And then when they released the DVD version, you'd get the 2-hour pay-per-view as it happened, and then an extra hour that would only be if you bought the DVD. And so usually so far they've been in sync with the stuff, but like we're talking about, there's going to be a match that will contradict what Prazak just said. But to what you were saying, Matt, I think what's interesting is you mentioned how they don't even, when they get to the Necro Butcher Jay Briscoe DVD exclusive match, they don't even try and rationalize what Prazak says here during the pay-per-view portion. But they also do on that DVD exclusive part of the show a Claudio match after they do on the pay-per-view a Claudio injury angle to take him off the pay-per-view. And Prazak does go out of his way to try and give you like a reason to justify that. So it's interesting that they did try and go the extra mile on one thing, but I don't know if on this thing they just decide, you know what, we can't even come up with a good excuse. Like I don't know if they just threw their hands up, but it's interesting that they didn't just give up on both. That they tried to explain one and not the other.
Yeah, and the second one was a much bigger plot point, the one they didn't try to explain, than the one they did try to explain.
But I mean, what'd you think about the match as an opener?
So it was definitely like fun. Like it was a short match. It was hot crowd. It's similar to the night before in that they were doing a lot of big moves. Ruckus does a pretty awesome hot tag as Evans like runs across the ring to dropkick Black, and then he turns. Evans does the hot tag. Ruckus gets the tag, and Evans runs across the ring to dropkick Black and turns that right into a Jacobs and turn it right into a moonsault on Black, or the other way around. I forget what I wrote. And we get a really chaotic sequence where everyone is hitting big moves and Ruckus is just flipping all over the place. And Jacobs does that cool splash over the top onto Ruckus while he's sitting on a chair, like he had done in some of the previous matches that they had together. And then Evans flies over and Black catches him and power bombs him into the guardrail. And yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff here. It's fast paced. But it is also just like a 5-minute match. So it's not as good as the match that the Vulture Squad had the night before against the No Remorse Corps, which I really liked a lot. I am just generally enjoying how the Vulture Squad is working together. I think like they have a cool style that all the matches are a lot of fun to watch that we've seen so far. But this was too short to really be all that much other than just kind of fun. And I think what I'm trying to decide is about this. Do we want the Age of the Fall in these kinds of like fun, quick, fast-paced matches, or does it undermine the gimmick a little bit? I'm not totally sure. Certainly when you see Necro Butcher wrestle, it feels closer to what they're trying to project than when you see Jacobs and Tyler Black wrestle. But I'm not totally sure if that's important. The other thing that I'm kind of torn on is, does it matter? Like, is it worth it to just have a hot match with a clean finish? Or is it weird to put two up and coming new groups against each other, when you don't have to? Like, both teams kind of needed to win here. I guess they decided that the Age of the Fall needed to win more, which is probably true. But the Vulture Squad doesn't exactly have a lot of momentum either. So, it's just an interesting choice all around. I think if you just don't think about all that extra stuff, it was a fun 5 minutes of action. I feel like you maybe want to aim a little bit higher on these ROH pay-per-views and just go for like really good matches with some substance. But this was a change of pace, a fast, quick, a good, quick, fun match. Maybe was worth showing too.
Yeah, I completely agree with pretty much everything you said there. There are cool spots in this match. Jacobs and Black repeat not only do they repeat the promo from the night before, they repeat an exact sequence from the night before where they sit an opponent in an open chair on the floor and Jacobs dives over the top rope to splash them and followed immediately by Black catching the other tag team opponent, running for a dive, and then he hits him with a running power bomb into the barricade. And when I say they did the exact sequence the night before, I mean the timing, the positioning, everything, like just a complete 1-to-1. Jack does a drop kick to one guy that like you mentioned, that flips into a moonsault on the other. And I thought, I thought those spots were really cool. I thought the finish was that really great combo where Jacobs and Black basically do like an ode to the Bulldogs senton, where Black has Evans in the torture rack and then Jacobs hits the senton. I thought even Jimmy's end times DDT into the guillotine choke, it's the best looking one yet. Just is really snappy and tight and fluid. It looked really good. Overall, I would say this is pretty fun. I've seen even wilder 5-minute go matches, but there's some real standout moves here, like you said. My one issue is like you. It's Jack Evans, the leader of the Vulture Squad, losing via tap out completely cleanly in 5 minutes right after he forms a new stable. This feels like another 2007 ROH example of Gabe not exactly getting some of these factions great momentum out of the gate. I realized they won a tag match the night before, but this was a very definitive, very quick loss suffered by the leader of a stable, no less, in their second tag match together. And I completely agree with you. I'll have more to say about the whole faction thing later, but yeah, this was again. It's separate. It's a separate conversation from the quality of the show, which is a different conversation. But I will say, if there was a theme to this show, like a meta theme, it is cracks showing in a lot of different ways. Like little problems are starting to become more noticeable, and I did enjoy the crowd chanting "Chocolate Vulture" for Ruckus. Like, I did not expect that to be a chant, but people like
that is how Smokes refers to him.
I know. So I like that they were like, you know what? That's a good chant. And now we get our first of the roundtable reviews. We're going to get star ratings and reviews from every one of the major guys other than Mike Johnson. But I will point out, and this is something I did last time we did one of these pay-per-views, which is I'm just doing very edited comments. This is not their full comments on the matches. I'm usually just doing whatever's like a descriptive of the, of like what they thought. So a lot of these comments will be very short. But Meltzer wrote in The Observer, a fast-paced series of crazy moves, 2.5 stars. Wade Keller wrote, great fast-paced world-class athleticism to open the show, 2 3/4 stars. Brian Alvarez wrote, I realize that only hardcore ROH fans are buying these pay-per-views, but just in case they get a few casual fans, it's probably a good idea to include some graphics. Fun, wild opener, 2 3/4 stars. Now, the funny thing about this, Matt, is one, it's Brian Alvarez all these years earlier still talking about graphics and video packages and the like. But two, Brian did this thing where when he reviewed pay-per-views, he reviewed them at like when he was writing his notes for his newsletter. He clearly was reviewing the matches like segment by segment as they happen. And so sometimes something would come up that would contradict his earlier review, and he would not go back and edit it. So like every other match on this show, has graphics that explicitly explain who the wrestlers are and
their goals. Their goals, yeah.
Exactly what a Brian Alvarez would want. But because they didn't do that for this first quote unquote impromptu match, Brian just leaves this that he wrote at the time in there. And in fact, Wade really goes into the loving the video thing, which I love the yin yang we get of opinions on this show, because this is Wade Keller. He wrote, ROH's screenshot stating what each wrestler's goal is really enhances the show, because in shorthand, it brings people who only watch their pay-per-views up to speed on each character. All it takes is one line like that to orient viewers to the undercard wrestlers and give each match more meaning.
Perfect, because all they got was one line.
Yeah, and I'll talk again about what these goals are later, and we'll see how much they really increase interest in these matches. We'll get into it. So yeah, Wade says, all it takes is one line like that to orient viewers to the undercard wrestlers and give each match more meaning. ROH has created a show that caters to its hardcore fans, but presents a friendly orientation for first-time viewers who might otherwise feel too behind to ever catch up and thus left behind. So again, couldn't get two more different opinions than Brian Alvarez and Wade Keller here. Immediately after the match, we get a quick flash of a graphic that shows a silhouette of a line of people marching off a cliff with the caption, "Follow the crowd, fall in line." The Age of the Fall mat, they are so edgy, and as we will see throughout the show, they are also apparently hackers, because they can break into the show and put things up.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny that like the edginess of Age of the Fall is basically just like quick cut-ins to like blurred like B-roll footage of things, which is basically just what like D-Generation X or like the NWO did 10 years earlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can't even muster it. I'm just so disappointed.
I know.
We then cut backstage where Morishima is with his Japanese handler. I believe on an honorable mention, our friends Shane and Jeff, they talked about how they briefly mentioned that apparently they talked about him more on a different episode. That guy, I forget his name. It might be Kensai. I forget. I should have written down his name. But he was from Hawaii and worked with them to be their translator with Japanese talent. And Shane really put him over as like a great guy and a real help to the promotion. So it's nice to always be able to put names to faces. Morishima immediately gets mad and throws a chair as his handler says Morishima doesn't want any cameras in the locker room. So, we're getting these little things to build to the main event. Next, we get an Eric Stevens highlight package as Eric, in a voiceover during the clip, says that throughout his life, he's never been the biggest, but he has size. He's never been the strongest, but he has power. He's never been the fastest, but he has athleticism. He says it means he's had to maximize his talents and work just a little bit harder than everyone else. His rookie year in ROH is almost over, and it's been a baptism by fire. Now he understands how things work. There may be people a little bigger, faster, stronger, but there's no one that can match that look in his eye. His name is Eric Stevens, and when you watch him, you're looking at relentless determination, which sounds like something that Vince McMahon would have.
Yes.
There's a lot of verbiage so far on this show that is just vague words that kind of mean something but don't really mean anything. Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer about this. They did a vignette to introduce Eric Stevens. For some reason, he reminds me of Perry Saturn as a singles wrestler in ECW. Huh. I didn't get that, but
that doesn't come off to me at all.
Go on that.
No, I was going to say, he says that his rookie year at ROH is almost over, and I was like, wait a minute, that's not true. And then I remembered that this aired 3 months later. So in terms of January 2008, yes, that is true. October 2007, not even close. I thought this was good. Like, I have no problem with it. Like, I think it did what it was intending to do.
I thought it was decent. I'm glad that he gave Eric, he's not wrestling on the pay-per-view card, something to spotlight him. But I do think it's a little of a weird angle. Like, it's not the most chest-thumping angle, like, to promote a guy of, like, I'm kind of big, but I'm not really big. I'm kind of fast, but I'm not really fast. It's the I'm a 7.5 out of 10. Which makes me work harder, which is weird because usually wrestling works well in these real extremes of like I'm a real underdog, I'm a real powerhouse giant, and the Eric Stevens thing is all about I'm kind of everything a little bit.
I honestly don't mind that. Like, I think it's fine to have somebody who has like a down-to-earth assessment of themselves. Just like, I'm just trying my best, man. I think there's room for characters like that too.
That would definitely be like if we were to sponsor a wrestler on this show from like a through the years spiritual sense, like who would represent us? The guy that's like I'm okay, I guess. Like might be the guy. Like except he also talks about how he has to work hard, and that definitely wouldn't represent me.
I mean, I think that Stevens is higher on himself than anyone who would represent this show.
Yeah, exactly. So back in the ring, Sweet and Sour Incorporated have returned, and Larry says that the Chris Hero holdout continues. But the good news is he has signed a deal to deliver the first women's match ever to be held on ROH pay-per-view. He calls Sarah Del Rey the greatest women's wrestler in the world. Her opponent, Daisy Hayes, is already in the ring, and Sweeney tells her to just remember who the star is here, sweetheart. So now we get our first of these incredible goals that I really agree with Wade, really boost the show. Del Rey's goal is prove she is best women's wrestler. Daisy Hayes' goal is earn respect. So yeah, like without those, I would have been like, what do these people want in a wrestling match?
Well,
but now.
Yeah. But my takeaway was Daisy Hayes, if that's her goal, she didn't wrestle on the right pay-per-view. There was 3 pay-per-views earlier. She could have had her way, but she just waited too long. She missed her window.
Exactly. So that brings us to Daisy Hayes defeated Sarah Del Rey via pinfall in 3 minutes 20 seconds with a roll-up. I don't know if I should be pleasantly shocked that ROH actually put a women's match on a pay-per-view or disappointed that it predictably went 3 minutes and mostly served as a backdrop for stuff involving the men. There just wasn't much time here to do much but try and hit some big spots, which they do. Daisy dives from the top turnbuckle to the floor. She wipes up both Del Rey and Bobby Dempsey on that. Del Rey hits her cool running big boots and stuff like her bridging fallaway slam, which I think are, if you're trying to have 3 minutes to try and capture people's attention that may have never seen you before, those are the spots from her to hit. Then Claudio comes back out. He gets into a fight with Sweet and Sour Incorporated at ringside. We cut to that during this 3-minute match. And then we cut back to the ring just long enough to see Daisy get the win with a roll-up. And then we cut back to the floor immediately to see Chris Hero hitting the Hero's welcome on Claudio on the floor. Prazak calls it a scumbag move by Hero attacking Claudio, except Claudio came out first. I get that Sweet and Sour Incorporated did a thing to piss him off by playing around with a scheduled match, but Claudio's the guy who made it physical. He came out and attacked people at ringside first. So is Hero really an asshole for then escalating the fight that Claudio started? I don't know if I can say that, but
depends on how your take on wrestling logic. But yes.
Normally, I save the newsletter comments for after both of us give the thoughts, but I think I want to read the comments here because I want to set you up nice for this, Matt, because I think this is interesting. What the difference between probably what you and I as regular ROH viewers will think about something like this and what people that just drop in for an occasional ROH show will think about this. Because let's go to the Observer first. Dave Meltzer wrote before he saw the pay-per-view, just on the live reports and talking to Gabe, he wrote, the mentality here is that ROH feels that by putting athletic women who are attractive but not the fake-looking types you see on television, that maybe some women can become interested in the product. It's an experiment to give them a pay-per-view match and try to present women in a different manner than WWE and TNA. Then Dave, once he saw the pay-per-view, writes about this match. The women were pushed as athletes. They looked like athletes instead of glamour girls dressed up to do fake wrestling. They pulled it off, and it was better than the vast majority of women's matches you'll see with the major promotions. Wade Keller wrote, not much to this match, but good, crisp, hard-hitting action, half a star. And Brian Alvarez wrote, meanwhile, outside, Hero was beating up Claudio. Then the lights went out. Too much stuff happening. Danielson came out, which we'll get to in a minute. While he's coming out, I will alert you that this match wasn't that long, but it was good. And Daisy in particular has really improved of late. All these people were way more impressed with this than I was. I thought this was fine, but these women on this night were given a crumb, and I felt like everyone in the newsletter crowd was acting like we got a meal here, which is kind of this was a huge step for women. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, to me, the one thing I wrote was this didn't do anything really to differentiate ROH women from the TV promotions of 2007. I guess it wasn't doing the ups, the scroll up the legs like ROH used to do, or talking about how hot they were or anything like that. But I don't remember. I guess I gotta rewatch some WWF 2000, WWE 2007. But
You really don't.
yeah, but like to see if it was that much work. But like this is the point is like yes, they did have some good action. There was nothing wrong with what either of Daisy Hayes or Sarah Del Rey did. They seemed good and competent and good wrestlers, right? But yeah, they were presented as afterthoughts, and having a short nothing match makes it seem like ROH values women just as much as WWE did. So I thought it was kind of a sad way to use pay-per-view time, because they could have had a much better match, like if they'd just been given the chance to. And I really don't. I don't know. I don't think there was so much on the show that needed to, like, I don't know, like. Yeah, also just starting the show with two really short matches in a row, like one okay, but like then two in a row doesn't seem to be what you are looking for ROH to do. But side note on what you said, I love picking on Wade Keller's weird reviews of shows. I feel bad about it. He seems like a very nice guy.
I love Wade, but we love Wade's beautiful mind.
Yeah. Okay. So good, crisp, solid action. Is that what he said?
Good, crisp, hard-hitting action, half a star.
Half a star. I don't know how you do star ratings, but to me, when I give a match half a star, I'm usually saying the match is bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say, like, because it's 3 minutes, but yeah, it's a weird, like there is something to be said for I don't always agree with it, but you know how cage match, they don't let people review matches that are shorter than 5 minutes, and it's probably to avoid things like this, where people are going to go, well, I liked it, but it was short, so I'm going to give it a low score. Like, might as well just not do the review then. Yeah,
I don't think half a star is the rating that you give a good, crisp, hard-hitting, action-packed match. I don't know. I mean, what you tell me, because I think you're a harsher rater than I am. So, how do you approach? What does half a star mean to you? Is half a star like good, but just not a lot of it? Is that how you rate half a star?
See, if something is short, generally, if it's under 5 minutes, I don't even give it my good, very good, great, average, above average. I don't usually even give it a qualifier, because I just go, I'll give you some general thoughts, but I can't really ascribe it a rating. Yeah, because if you just said that's a half a star match, to me, that's like, oh, that's really bad. That's almost a dud. That's almost like just complete crap. And to me, dud would be like a contender for among the worst matches of the year in some years. And if you're saying it's just the tiniest notch above that, to me, that's half a star.
Yeah. If I were forced to give this match a star rating, and not like I need to give a match a star rating, but just for comparison, I couldn't see going lower than 1.5 stars, lower than that just makes it seem like a bad match. I'd probably say 2.25 stars for a solid 3-minute thing, that's probably what I would say. But half a star just seems very incongruent with saying anything positive about a match.
To me, a half a star rating would be for a match where it's this was a bad match, but there was one good moment in it. So half a star, you know.
Or just it's a bad match, but I've seen worse, something like that. Yeah.
I will say something that kind of bugged me from Dave clearly being told by Gabe or people on ROH that, we put on this match to try and attract the women's audience and see if we can get a women's audience for the pay-per-view. I feel like it's almost insulting, the idea of, well, maybe if we put on a 3-minute women's match, people will buy the pay-per-view. Do you really expect, maybe this is me being cynical, but I feel like the only reason they put this match on the pay-per-view was to get the comments we read from the newsletters.
Yes.
They get a nice back pat from the newsletters without actually really having to do anything.
Basically, I would say that's basically it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel my memory isn't great on this, but I feel like at this point they really start winding down even the little bit they'd been doing with the women at this point. I don't remember there being a ton more notable women's matches in the near future after this in ROH.
The next pay-per-view, the women get a 3-way that goes 6 minutes and change, and then I think they're on maybe one more pay-per-view in the Sapolsky era. So even just on the pay-per-views, this idea of, we're going to try experimenting with the women on pay-per-view, the experiment doesn't last very long. And they don't get much to work with. But, yeah, I guess just to sum up on this, I would say like you, I would have to go back and watch 2007 WWE, but because there was an era where, yes, this was better than definitely than like the 2000 era of women that were pressured into getting breast implants, that were barely trained fitness models who could not wrestle at all, that were hurting each other, that were usually doing matches that were probably the short, if not shorter, just to titillate men before and cool down the show before main events, and often doing like the pudding matches, the mud matches. Like, is this a step up for that? Yes, but I feel like we were starting to enter the era where the mainstream promotions were going to start passing the low bar ROH was clearing here, because like, I don't know about WWE, but Amazing Kong is about to sign with TNA, and her stuff with Gail Kim is going to be miles ahead of this kind of stuff in terms of the opportunity given and the quality of output. Even though these women are talented, they're not getting the chance. So, like, this idea of ROH is not going to be able to, I'm just saying, ROH is not going to be able to do the 3-minute women's match and get the back pat saying, oh, this is better than what the major leagues are doing for much longer, I think, at this point.
Yep.
That well's getting dry. Then the lights go out. And final countdown hits. Bryan Danielson enters and says the lengths Larry and his group will go to in pursuit of the almighty dollar are disgusting, and they represent everything that is wrong with professional sports. Bryan says they like to brag about Chris Hero's the best athlete in pro wrestling. Danielson asks them, prove it right now. Hero gets in the ring and the crowd chants, you're going to get your fucking head kicked in. Then Hero goes to Bobby Cruz and has Bobby announce, quote, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hero would like you to know that is purely speculation, which I gotta say, that was a funny line, and it gets one of the bigger laughs I've heard at a wrestling show in quite some time. Like, you could literally hear people in this crowd go, ha, 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 like legit ha-has, like not pandering, like they weren't just laughing. You could literally hear ha, ha, ha. Like, I was like, wow, those are legit ha-has. And,
see, that was legit. That was a legit ha-ha too that I just gave.
Yeah, it was great. I love a legit ha-ha, and we got some. So Hero gets in the ring. The match is on. Danielson's goal for this match, Morishima and the world title. Hero's goal, show he is best athlete. Again, great goals. Bryan Danielson defeated Chris Hero via ref stoppage in 10 minutes, 21 seconds after a series of stomps to the head. I'm going to go first on this match too, because I'm not even going to count the last match as a match, just like most people didn't. This was a condensed version of the 2007 Chris Hero show. We get a little stalling before the match with the Bobby Cruz announcement. And instead of this lasting 20 minutes, it's 10. But there's still a lot of Hero theatrics here. A lot of it is aimed at mocking Danielson. I would say all that stuff is pretty great. Like, Hero remarks on a rope break that he also has till 5. Hero at one point, he's wearing a headband during this match. He pulls down his headband over just one eye to mock Danielson back when he was wearing the eye patch. Hero at one point pretends to do cattle mutilation, but instead he just does one of his dumb kip-ups. He even pulls out the small package on Danielson. So I like that he was doing a lot of match-specific stuff to really dig in to Danielson here. But the pattern of a match as a whole is they do a little grappling, then Hero does something wacky, then they do a little more grappling. And we talk about Hero's 2007 act, how it can eat up his opponents, it can take all the attention away from them. And it's crazy to see it here where it even partially works that way against Bryan Danielson. Like, not all the way. Bryan does get good reactions for things here, but there are moments in this match where Bryan's just calmly waiting for Hero to finish doing his routine so they can wrestle again. And it was like, wow, like even Danielson's getting 2007 heroed. And it's only in the last 3 minutes or so where I would say they start doing the higher intensity offense to knuckle down into a match that has a bit more flow and intensity. But even the finish comes out of nowhere because Bryan just out of nowhere throws a running kick. He does his head stomps for the win. The whole thing was entertaining. I'd rank this match good, 3 stars, maybe 3.25. But if you were buying a pay-per-view expecting a serious Bryan Danielson quality match, you didn't get it on this pay-per-view. In fact, the fans who attended the B show of this weekend the night before, they got a far, far superior Bryan Danielson match against Austin Aries, because if you did not listen to that show, that was a legitimately awesome match. But I will say, Hero's act was fun here, as it often is. But if this was your first time watching Chris Hero, I will also add that I don't think you'd come away from this show knowing that Chris Hero was actually a good wrestler. I think if this was your first exposure to Chris Hero, I think you would just think, oh, this is a comedy wrestler who's like competent in the ring. And yeah, this almost felt like what would be a TV match if ROH had TV in 2007 rather than a DVD or pay-per-view match to me.
Well, I don't think if you watched Chris Hero in 2007 ROH at all, you would realize what a good wrestler he is, right? There are very few matches where he like really shows totally what he could do as far as like having great wrestling matches. He was all about the character in 2007, which has made for some very fun moments, and it's been, as you've heard if you've listened to the show, made for some very frustrating moments. Hero even gets a "you can't wrestle" chant here, which at first I was like, ooh, I bet that stings Chris Hero to not show how well he can wrestle. And then I said, oh, wait a minute, of course not. Like that probably makes him thrilled that he got the crowd to think that.
Later he does a top wrist rock in the match. Sorry to interrupt. And he just says, who can't wrestle now? So he's playing into it.
Yeah, no, he loved it. I was definitely, my initial response was definitely wrong. I also found it funny when Hero did his flippy showboating at the beginning, and Prazak said, I hate it when he does that. Because, I don't know, I thought that was just a good way to like get over how you're supposed to react to Hero doing all that stuff. It was interesting to use Danielson this way on a pay-per-view, since the first three shows, he was used to have like, great Bryan Danielson matches. And this was definitely not that. They were not going for a great match. They were mainly trying to get Chris Hero's character over, and then briefly get over the fact that Danielson was an ass kicker. And, so it was entertaining, but definitely like a lesser Bryan Danielson match, right? Like it was not necessarily what you would totally buy a pay-per-view for. So like, I would just say this was like an odd start to the show in general, because with ROH, usually they were like, okay, let's get some great action in the ring. And they really, spent the first, like, I don't know, how long was this, 45 minutes, not having a great match.
Yeah.
Which again, just for a normal wrestling company, I think that would have been fine. But I think for ROH, like a 2-hour show, you generally expect it to be densely loaded with great wrestling, and they went for a different approach on this show, and I'm not totally sure how well it worked. The crowd liked it, but another thing I do want to add about this whole thing, like, do you think that this whole angle they did with Claudio and then Danielson coming out and all this impromptu stuff, do you think this worked overall? Like, do you think this was a good use of these wrestlers and a good use of pay-per-view time to do this whole angle? I guess the idea was to get over the fact that Larry Sweeney is an agent who does things with contracts and can make all kinds of things happen with his negotiating. I guess, is that the idea?
I feel like it's Gabe trying to pack as much as he can into the pay-per-views, where it's like, okay, if Claudio, we don't have time on a 2-hour pay-per-view to give Claudio a match for this pay-per-view cycle. How about we give him an injury angle that can help heat up the Hero match? And yeah, we can also use the reason why he's not getting the match as a way to put over Larry Sweet. So it's like he's trying to do a million things, and Gabe sometimes really succeeds at that, but it also, he's trying to do that a lot in this first, like you said, 45 minutes of the show. And I will say, before I throw it back to you, Matt, someone that really agrees with your comments about this was Wade Keller, because I'll read a quote he wrote about this part of the show. He wrote, I can get over it, but I'm not a fan of a pay-per-view consisting of 2 impromptu matches. It just seems too much like a make-it-up-as-you-go-along type of promotion when that happens. It's something Paul Heyman did, a mentor of current ROH booker Gabe Sapolsky, back on the original ECW pay-per-view. So that's kind of like hitting close to what you were saying, not exactly, but like this idea of, I think you said earlier, like the idea of, is it a great look for a pay-per-view to just have like this many impromptu matches? Like,
yeah, I mean,
the idea of, we're making it as we go along.
When you think of it though, okay, so I'm trying to think back. Paul Heyman did do that sometimes, but never on the really good ECW pay-per-views. Like, if you think of the, and also when he did do it, a lot of the time it was because of like the fact that ECW was kind of a mess and wrestlers would leave suddenly or get hurt, and he kind of had to play around with the booking of a show to get a show in the in the ring. You know what I mean? Like, like the impromptu nature of Mike Awesome coming out was because everyone knew Taz was leaving, and then there was this whole weird thing with Chris Candido was supposed to wrestle Taz, but then they beat Chris Candido in the first minute, and then it ends up being Bubba Ray Dudley against Taz, and it's like trying to work around a whole bunch of stuff. So this was Gabe doing it on purpose for reasons he did not have to. That's a difference.
I think that's a perfect point because, yeah, like for Paul Heyman, I think you just hit the nail on the head. It was smoke and mirrors because a lot of times that needed to kind of be part of the selling point of the show is like the surprises and the intrigue because the matches themselves weren't always going to be the most, like they weren't going to be, a lot of the matches that turned out to be like the swerve surprise, sometimes they would be like, oh, you could have put that in the marquee and sold some tickets. But a lot of times it was more just, oh, the thrill is the surprise. That if you had just pre-hyped this, it wouldn't have drawn people. Like, ROH, like you had the stuff to put on a good show. You know, you didn't need to hide it with this, like you were saying, with you know, this is almost like a distraction from what. But the other thing I would just mention about this match is Prazak says during the match that Claudio was out for the evening because paramedics are tending to him. He could have a broken bone in his face from taking the Hero's Welcome on the floor. And then Prazak later during the pay-per-view gets word that Claudio's been taken to the hospital. So keep all in that mind for later because that will come into play on the DVD portion of the show. But for the pay-per-view crowd, he's been written off of the show. Going to the newsletter reviews of this match, Dave Meltzer said this wasn't the classic Danielson match, but was good for what it was. 2 3/4 stars. Wade Keller would write, really good match with a good backstory and character development, 3 1/4 stars. And in the funny thing, we covered this maybe a little bit in older episodes. Brian Alvarez really did not get the Chris Hero character at first. Like he hated Chris Hero. He would rant about podcasts. I remember a young Trevor Dame on the message board taking Brian Alvarez to task, be like, you don't get, it's like a parody of a certain kind of thing. Brian Alvarez by this point finally understood what Chris Hero was. I didn't include it, but he wrote a bunch of comments about how Chris Hero was like the greatest ever. Brian Alvarez by this point had come full circle and now loved Chris Hero. And this is what he wrote about this match. In between the showing off, Danielson was being the fuck out of him. For a while, I thought this was the future style of pro wrestling, but then I realized that this is Bryan Danielson doing this. And well, not a lot of people are Bryan Danielson. This match was massively entertaining, 3 1/2 stars. So we've come all the way from Brian Alvarez not getting Chris Hero to now he is a bigger fan of him than any of the other critics. Like, this was great. So then we get a plug for ROHWrestling.com set to Doomsday Clock because, as always, if ROH pays for a theme, a licensed music, they are going to use it the entire show. We see clips of a lot of the major stars who have worked in ROH in the past, you know, which they've done before where, you know, hey, trying to get people to buy the DVDs by saying, look, we've had big stars here. I love that they include Jeff Hardy in this package because, Matt, I was just thinking, imagine you're a Jeff Hardy fan. Like, the intended audience is this is probably someone who's buying an ROH pay-per-view. This is their first ROH show. You want to get to buy the DVD. So imagine this worked. Imagine you're a Jeff Hardy fan. You're watching this. This is your first ROH show. You see that clip and you go, Jeff was in ROH? I love Jeff Hardy. And you seek out the ROH show he was on and you buy it. And you find out that the one show he ever did for ROH was a short, bad match where he was mercilessly booed by a crowd that gave him no chance. Like, is that what you want to sell to that fan? I don't know.
Well, you'll be like, well, you might be like, hey, I don't like this Jeff Hardy, but hey, that Homicide guy who won that 4-way is really good. Oh, wait, he's not in ROH anymore. But wait, that CM Punk, oh man, what a great promo. He's in WWE, of course. Okay, Samoa Joe was the world champion. No, he's not there anymore either. Yeah. So yeah, I guess BJ Whitmer was still around. BJ Whitmer was still around, you know?
I get trying to drive sales to the back catalog, but I feel like when you drive sales to the back catalog, you want people to have good experiences. And that'd be like saying, hey, ICP fans, you want to see, you know, buy the ROH Uncensored DVD to see the time ICP. You're not going to make them happy with that.
Really, who they should have focused on was Just Incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do you want to see the best moment of Just Incredible's life? Buy this show. Like, I still love that Just Incredible found that like months after I clipped it and put it on Twitter, and he just liked it. And I was like, you know what? That probably made Just Incredible's day. Like,
yeah, it probably did.
Yeah, that was a good day.
Yeah.
So, you know, we now jump to Adam Pearce in the ring, walking around an open chair. Dave Prazak calls Adam Pearce the master of mind games, which for some reason made me laugh because it's just like that's a lot.
Yeah.
Pierce says he's come out by himself with a purpose, and that purpose is he wants to talk to Kevin Steen. Steen comes out to no music. Pierce tells Steen to sit down in the chair, which he does. Pierce says he represents the group known as the Hangmen 3. They operate on 3 terms: violence, sheer brutality, and an unmitigated ruthlessness. I wrote my notes. Feels like you could reduce that down to 2 terms. Really. Again, more kind of vague, meaningless descriptors on the show.
Yes.
Pierce points out that they recently attacked Delirious, and he sees Steen's in a similar situation with El Generico. He's with another man that hides behind a mask and is a loser. And Steen, at this point, hilariously nods in agreement, like, yes, I am with a loser who hides behind a mask. I love Kevin Steen.
Yeah.
Adam says Generico cost Steen a shot at the ROH Tag Team Championship. Well, technically, they were in a match for the Tag Team Championship. And he says, I saw your anger afterwards, Kevin. He says, I offer you an escape, a chance to make it the Hangman 4. Pierce says to show Kevin he's serious, he presents an offering. Out come Brent Albright and BJ Whitmer, and they're dragging a beat-down El Generico to the ring. Shane Hagedorn is walking behind them. They bring Generico into the ring and hold him up to Steen. Pierce calls Generico the man who has let Steen down at every turn. Pierce tells Steen to let his dark side out and strike Generico down.
That's my favorite. It was let the dark side within you come out, strike him down. I was like, oh my god, the drama. They had to know this was like partially funny, right?
Like the master of mind games, and then it's just basically him trying to do Emperor Palpatine. Like, yes. It was a trip. So
Steen being positioned as Luke Skywalker, does that mean that? Who is El Generico then?
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks that we can't say that he was Han Solo, because I think El Generico would be a good Chewie in this point. But no, I agree. Steen's Luke Skywalker. Is El Generico Leia? I don't know.
Is El Generico Darth Vader?
This is the geekiest conversation we've ever had on the show, and that covers a lot of ground. Steen eventually, Steen cocks his right hand. He considers attacking Generico, but eventually he turns around. He decks Adam Pierce instead. He gets into a brawl with all of the Hangman 3. Steen eventually gets beaten down. The numbers game wins out until out comes Delirious to make the save. Delirious cleans house. He grabs the mic. He cuts a promo on Delirious ease. He hands the mic to Steen, who says, I have no idea what that meant, but there's only one man in ROH who's going to have fun smacking around El Generico, and that's me. He wraps an arm around Generico. Delirious dives onto the Hangman 3 on the floor. Steen says it looks like they've got a 6-man tag. So, yeah, this was basically, I guess, they did a very, over the last 2 shows, short-term tease of, like, Steen and Generico breaking up, and I guess this is like the idea of we're now transitioning Steen to not really changing his character, but we're going to he's a babyface at this point now, by really reaffirming his friendship with Generico and attacking a heel group.
Position against heels, committing to Generico. So yes, that was his version of a face turn. And yes, if Steen was going to turn face, it had to be like this, where he doesn't actually change the fact that he's a prick. Like, he has to be, it's a quote, he's our scumbag sort of situation.
Exactly. Like, I'm an asshole. Like, I'm an asshole to this guy, but no one else is allowed to be an asshole to that guy. I mean, that is a perfect kind of like, honestly, that's a better one-line encapsulation of a wrestler's character than any of these goals on this show.
Yes, yes.
That tells you everything you need to know about this guy at this point. I will say, before we get to the match, one thing that was really, I thought was funny was, ever since, BJ Whitmer joined the Hangman 3, where he cut his hair short and dyed it really, like, unnaturally blonde. The crowd's been chanting that he looks like Steve Carell. Everyone's been getting on him in live reports and stuff. And I thought, poor guy. Dave Meltzer comes at him from the other direction. Dave writes, BJ Whitmer with short blonde hair looking far too much like Mr. Kennedy. So I love that all BJ Whitmer is getting now is, like, since he's done the hair changes, like, you look too much like other people. Like, it's just different people now. It's just so poor guy. But I guess not that much of a poor guy when you think about modern circumstances. But anyway, The Hangman 3.
You know, we can't say anything nice about these people. You know, it'll just come back to bite us in the ass.
We can't talk about Matt Thompson. We can't. Matt, if I can't praise Matt Thompson and B.J. Whitmer and not feel weird about it, who can I praise? But that brings us.
You know, I'm trying to think who can you praise.
The list grows shorter by the week, but
I'm trying. Like I would say, like some like famous humanitarian, but then like you find out they're problematic also. So I don't know who could you praise?
But maybe we can find some praise for.
I'm gonna say Harriet Tubman. Just go ahead and praise her. I'm not gonna look up to see if there's anything wrong with that. I feel good about it. Praise Harriet Tubman. Just do it.
I'm a tub man.
There you go.
That's what we go. That's what our fans of Harriet call us. We're tub men.
A deep vein thrum tubzo.
This show's going off the rails.
This is probably problematic in and of itself. Disrespectful to a great person in history. Yeah. A couple of white assholes just making light of important stuff.
To be fair, we're framing her as like, I think that's a great thing where when you were trying to think of who's like the most unproblematic, best person to praise in the world, I think if that's of all the people in humanity's history, if you come up as one of your like gut reaction first people that pop into your head, that's actually like kind of a tremendous compliment, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, like that's pretty good if that's like a default name that pops into your head. So anyway, the Hangman 3 of Adam Pearce, B.J. Whitmer, and Brett Albright, scored to the ring by Shane Hagedorn, defeated Delirious, El Generico, and Kevin Steen in 7 minutes, 44 seconds when Albright pinned Delirious after a half Nelson suplex. So yet another short-ish match to open the show, yet another new faction that's trying to get exposure. Matt, what do you think? Was this one any different than the others?
No, it's interesting how much they're really pushing the Hangman 3 hard, though. Like, I genuinely did not expect Steen and Generico to lose this match. That solidified the fact that they were baby faces now. Like, it was surprising to me that they were pushing the Hangman 3 that hard. That said, I do think it got fun near the end. Like, I thought that the work, like the heat that was gotten by the Hangman 3 was not the most excited. Pierce's splash looked nice, and his choke slam where he almost flips Delirious over. I always say the most underrated choke slam in wrestling history, based on what we've been watching. In fact, maybe my favorite choke slam of anybody's. Who does a good choke slam? Akira Taue? Like, I don't know. Like, who's choke slams?
911?
Yeah.
The Big Show? But like, I think when we talked about this on another show, I think what I said is like, if we went through like per inch of height, best choke slam, I don't think there's like, because other guys that have good choke slams, it's like, oh, the visual of they're so tall and get the guy so high up in the air. Like, I don't know if there's a bigger average height guy choke slam than Adam Pearce.
Yeah. I agree. I also like when Albright does his delayed German suplex and he does squats while holding Delirious up. Like, you can't deny that that's very impressive, right?
Yeah.
But in general, I thought the Whitmer and Albright and stuff beating over Delirious in the corner was not the most exciting. I also thought that when Steen got his hot tag, the crowd did not react as big to him as I thought they would. Like, it made it seem like, he does a good hot tag. It's very energetic. He incorporates a nut shot to show that he hasn't changed that much. But it doesn't seem like it was something the crowd was like absolutely clamoring for yet. Does that make sense? Like, maybe they could have milked that a little bit longer to get the crowd to really want it before they did this angle. I thought the crowd actually reacted bigger to Generico. But like there was also a spot where after Generico and Steen do double teams, they hug, but then Steen shoves Generico away and then does a flip dive, which I thought was a cute spot. At that point, I did think that the match got fun. And we got I think something that added a little bit of a wrinkle to the match was Delirious biting Adam Pearce's ear to the point where his ear got really bloody. That was something a little bit different and new. So I thought that the ending of the match was more interesting and kind of fun, but I didn't think that this was I'd say this was maybe because there were 4 matches in a row like this. I was just waiting for like a ROH pay-per-view caliber match, and I didn't think this was it either. Maybe if this was the only match like this on the card, I would have liked it better, or if this was the opener. But an hour into the show, I was sort of like, all right, let's get to the really good stuff that you want from an ROH pay-per-view. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I couldn't remember her name. You might, but she was a guest, I think, at WrestleMania 2. But there was that old Wendy's woman spokesperson.
Yeah, Claire Peller. Where's the beef?
Exactly. Like you're feeling like Claire Peller. You're asking like, where's the plant-based meat at this point? You know, to enjoy.
I'm a regular. People do compare me to Claire Peller on a regular basis.
You are adorable and America's sweetheart, so that makes sense. But no, I agree again. I mean, this was similar to the Age of the Fall tag that was the opener in that they went to the trouble to have a basic hot tag structure, even though they didn't have a lot of time. And I like the classic tag match structure. It's a classic for a reason. But in matches this short, I feel like sometimes that means you don't get enough of the fun part because you're spending, even if you're in a match this short, even if you're spending just a couple minutes doing like the beat down, that's less time for, fun stuff. And, in a 15-minute match, well, the payoff can be worth the little bit of build you put into it. But here, like in the case of this pay-per-view, you get very little in ring from Steen and Generico, who are two of the best wrestlers in the entire promotion at this point. There's a hot start. Then you get Delirious' face in peril. And like you, I felt like the Hangman 3's control segment isn't that entertaining. They're not terrible at it, but they're not particularly good at it either. And so when he makes that hot tag, you only get, like you, that's when I thought, oh, the match really picks up then. But that's like 2 minutes, And again, it's another thing where, like, if I bought this pay-per-view hoping to see a great Danielson match and I got what I got, I'd be a little disappointed. If I bought this going, oh, Steen Generico, and I get maybe 2 minutes of in-ring from them, I'd be like, oh, I could get more than that from any ROH DVD of this era. I felt like this is above average as a match still, despite all that. I like that that after the night before where the Hangman 3 were occasionally a little silly, they were all business here. I think that fits more of what they're trying to be. I liked, like you point out, Albright doing the squats while holding Delirious and delayed vertical suplex. Yeah, how can you not be impressed by that? And that was honestly more of the big, strong, bully type stuff that I think the Hangman 3 could do well and should have been doing more of. It's like that kind of, we're so strong, we're bigger than you, we're bullies, we're going to just flaunt and show off. And I also agree with you. I liked the finish where Delirious can't stop biting Pierce's ear to the point of drawing blood, which I think probably means, unless that was like a legit, like, I wonder if that was either, I don't think it was, but maybe that could have been Pierce going, bite me hard way, brother. But I bet you that was a rare case of ear blading where Pierce probably cut his own ear because you get like legit blood from the ear that the camera really zooms in on. But like you, I like the finish because it was a way to protect the baby faces. I agree with you that it was a little weird. Gabe is doing this a lot where some new development happens where a faction gets formed or like Steen makes a big character change and then they lose very quickly afterwards. But I will say this finish did kind of protect them because it was Delirious is so mad at the Hangman 3 and Adam Pearce in particular that he wouldn't stop biting this guy and he took his eye off the ball and that allowed Albright to sneak up on him and beat him. So yeah, I didn't think it was a bad, I liked the finish too. But again, my criticism of not just this match, but it's just like you. Again, we're really in sync on this show. The whole pay-per-view up to this point is what I said about the Danielson Hero match, and that is that it feels like a TV show. And, it's been nothing but matches a little shorter than you'd want, nothing that feels too substantial, and the focus is seemingly at this point all on introducing pay-per-view viewers to all these new stables, starting some new storylines like the Steen Generico versus the Hangman 3, and all that would be fine on a free TV show, but yeah, I think on a pay-per-view, like you were saying, you want more. And I think one thing ROH has not been perfect on up to this point in its history, but has overall done very well, is making most shows feel substantial enough that it justifies buying it while still setting up things for the future. And that's actually really tough. Like, I always try and give Gabe big credit for that because in a wrestling promotion, you typically want to build your feuds to bigger shows. Every show can't be WrestleMania. And you need to have shows that have lesser matches and less satisfying finishes to build up talent and stories to get to those big shows. And I think Gabe was generally very good at, even when booking the shows we see on DVD, the shows we'd qualify as like less essential and inferior, he'd at least try and give each of those shows at least something that felt like a match or a moment of weight. He wasn't perfect at that, especially as they expanded their calendar and he had to book more shows. But I think he did pretty well at that. And I think doing these 6 2-hour pay-per-views a year poses a new challenge for him in that respect, because he's working with a full hour less per show, and all these pay-per-views are kind of expected to be bigger shows. And I realize the second half of the show is all longer matches that do have more weight. So even here, he is trying to do more of that balancing act of like, here's half of the pay-per-view to set up for the future, and then here's the hour plus that hopefully makes you happy you bought the pay-per-view. But I feel like you're seeing another crack where, like, on a 3-hour show, he could give all these undercard matches a little more time and a little more breathing room. And here it's like, I have to kind of cram everything into this first hour to make room for the second hour. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how he approached it. I still would have preferred if he had taken a different approach, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Like, I will say, nothing on the show up to this point has been bad. It's all been at least somewhat entertaining. It just hasn't felt like a pay-per-view. And like you said, you expect from ROH, like, dense wrestling. And this first nearly an hour at this point, I think, has felt the opposite of dense, right? Except for angles. I guess it's dense with, like, getting names out there and little angle things in there. But, yeah. Anyway, Dave wrote about this. They beat down Delirious and it got little heat, which is something you pointed out, with the Steen tag in. Fans aren't into the Hangman 3 at this point. Steen and Generico were toned down in this match because Generico's hurting with a hamstring injury and Steen has a herniated disc, I believe, in the neck. So that does make you feel a bit bad about saying, oh, these guys didn't do much on the show. But then they both did a lot more the night before that wasn't a pay-per-view. Like, Steen did a full main event with Morishima where he went pretty big, and Generico had that 3-way where he went pretty wild. So then when Dave actually watched the pay-per-view, he wrote, a hot match ending when Pierce was bleeding from the ear after Delirious bit him, but Albright took Delirious from behind with a half Nelson German and scored the pin. He gave this match, Matt, a rating of 3 stars and an apostrophe. I don't know what that means, but it is 3 stars and an apostrophe. Wade Keller reviewed this match as another good, concise, all-action, intense, heated tag match, 2 3/4 stars. And then Brian Alvarez went nuts. He wrote, Steen and Generico are such a great team if you've never noticed. All action, 3.5 stars.
Hey, you know what? Times are different, I guess.
Yeah. The Pierce's goal for this match, lead the Hangman 3 to the top. Steen's goal, hurt people. So yeah. A few fans during this match did chant steroids at Albright, so I guess if you want to say that's a bit of being a snarky crowd, that's not the first time fans have chanted steroids at Brent Albright on a show.
Definitely not. Yeah, I mean, that's, you could say that's snarky, but it's certainly not unusual for these crowds.
After the match, the camera zooms in on Adam Pearce's bleeding ear, and we then cut to Nigel McGuinness in his locker room. Nigel says this is a pretty crappy locker room, but that's okay, because for some wrestlers, it's not about being a TV star or making $1 million. It's about having a love for professional wrestling and doing something you've dreamt of since you were a kid. He's sat in a lot of these locker rooms. He's paid his dues to get here today, and because of that, he's got opportunities like he has tonight. Nigel says it's funny. He's known as this tough soccer hooligan from England, but the truth is he's still that 15-year-old kid who sat in Wembley Stadium and dreamt of being a professional wrestler. He's still the kid who went to Cincinnati, Ohio and paid his dues. But he's also the guy who headbutts you and makes you bleed, who lariats you and knocks you out. And that's all he needs to get the world title tonight. That belt means something in this business. The ROH world title means you're the best in the world, and it also means that a 15-year-old's dream came true. I thought this was a good Nigel promo. It was a bit more calm and human, which we've seen from him before do this trick, and I think he's really good at that. And I really enjoyed that when he talked about being the guy who headbutts you until you bleed and lariats you to knock you out. He did get more intense, but just for a moment and just a little bit. Like, he didn't do the loud, quiet, loud thing. He just did the quiet, little more intense, back to calm again, just to show you that he had that edge. And I thought that worked better than the traditional move of screaming your head off. Like, I thought this was a pretty good promo.
I think I liked it even more than you. I think this is, maybe the best Nigel promo I've ever heard, or at least the best earnest Nigel promo I ever heard. And, not quite as good as Danielson's promo from man up, but one of the best things on this whole show. Like, I thought it was just a really excellent promo.
Yeah, I think I like the promo we saw a few shows ago where he kind of did this cadence. I forget exactly what the content of that promo was. I think I like that promo a little bit better than this one, but I really like this one too. And I do like that he kind of used the seediness and low budgetness of ROH as an advantage. The idea of like, yeah, I don't get to go in the greatest locker rooms, but this is like about love of the game, and this is where the great wrestling is, and this is going to be my dream come true here. This is not a stepping stone. This is me, winning a title that really means something. Right here's the dream. Wade Keller really liked this too. He wrote, "By the time this promo aired, a viewer couldn't help but be invested in Nigel in his quest to win the world title. He not only got his character across and summarized his path to this big opportunity, but established his in-ring style. The comment about being a 15-year-old at Wembley Stadium with a dream was especially strong, as it helped viewers at home relate to him, especially those who are around his age or have been to an event that inspired them also. Not necessarily to become a pro wrestler, though. ROH's presentation of this match, from the pre-match segments to the announcing to the post-match celebration, made this feel as much like a real sporting event and epic fight as anything in pro wrestling these days. I don't know if I would go that big as Wade does there, but I did think this was good. I do think that between like cutting to Morishima and Nigel in their locker rooms to start the show and this, they did what they could in a 2-hour pay-per-view to try and make you feel like this is a big night. Next, we get a clip from Fifth Year Festival in New York City where Roderick Strong turned on Austin Aries. And that brings us to Austin Aries defeating Roderick Strong via pinfall in 21 minutes after he hit a 450 splash, knees to the chest of Roddy. I would call this match, Matt, hard-nosed indie wrestling. It's Aries and Strong having their match. They're like their 2000s indie work rate style bout, but there's just a bit more intensity. Early on, they're like punctuating their offense by spitting or paintbrushing the other after certain moves. I noticed they were doing very little crowd interaction compared to normal. And they get down to business right away in this match. There's no feeling out there's no real fat, I would say, to this match. At a couple moments, I did get a little of that 2006-2007 Briscoes vibe where the effort level and action is really high, but it's so back and forth without a lot of nuance that I for a few moments, I was a little numbed. But I will say, I didn't feel that very often. This is the first match on the show that felt like a big pay-per-view match. And we're like halfway into the show at this point. By the time it's over, we're over halfway into the show, I think. This was but this was that big event, go the extra mile effort. Strong kicks out of a 450, which rarely happens. They had an insane spot at the end of the match where Aries brainbusters Roddy off the apron through a table that's been suspended between the apron and the guardrail. And that looked fantastic. There's a way to do that spot that's safe, but it looks really ugly. And I feel like they did this spot fairly safe, hopefully, but it looked really good. Even the finish was kind of quote-unquote extra because Aries wins with a second 450, but this time he crashes knees first onto Roddy's chest. And maybe that was a mistake, but I have to think it was intentional because Aries set Roddy closer to the turnbuckle than I've ever seen him place anyone before for a 450, to the point where even before he hit the move, I was thinking, there's no way he can hit this move properly, and he didn't. He put his knees right into his chest. But I thought these guys did a very good job also of basically emptying the tank and doing all their hits in terms of moves, but they threw in enough counters and slight variations where it didn't feel like they were just running down a checklist of all their stuff. And again, I think it was done with some extra intensity on this night. There were little shots here and there between the big moves and moments that kind of made it, and it's also some moments of selling, and all that kind of made it feel like it was more of a struggle and less of an exhibition. You probably could have cut 3 or 4 minutes out of this match and told them to cut out a few minor spots and do the rest faster, and I actually think that would have made the match worse for my taste. I think 21 minutes was the right length for this, in that I feel like they did the right amount of stuff, and they did it at the right pace. Like, it never felt drawn out, but it also never felt rushed. This was a match where I felt like these are two of the most consistent guys in the company, but even for them, this was a night where they felt noticeably on to me. They just felt really on point in their execution. And so I will just end by saying, despite all the praise, that slightly numbing effect was having me wanting to give this like a high, very good. But the big spots at the end, like the table brainbuster and the 450 knees, that pushed it into flat out great for me. I thought this was a great match. This was better than their previous ROH match to my taste, but probably more importantly for them, this time they didn't have to follow Jimmy Jacobs and BJ Whitmer doing an insane cage match where they did just absolutely insanity. So, it was a better setting for them too. But overall, yeah, I enjoyed this quite a bit.
Yeah, I would probably put it in that like very, very good category. Not quite great, and I think maybe that numbing effect that you were talking about maybe hit me a little bit harder to where, like, in some parts of the early portion of the match, I was a little bit bored. That they didn't quite, like, hook me into, like, what was happening because it just felt like a lot of stuff. And you're right, like, it was hard-hitting, well-executed stuff. And there were some, a lot of spitting, which is, one of Roderick Strong's trademarks for a long time. Even when he was a babyface, he did a lot of that. Does he still do a lot of spitting on TV? I feel like no, right? You don't really see that so much from Roderick Strong in 2026.
I don't think so.
But yeah, and there was a cool spot where Strong like pulled Aries leg first out of the corner into a backbreaker. There was cool stuff. But yeah, once they actually get into those later sequence, especially once you get to the spot where they like fight outside the ring when Strong when Aries falls all the way to the floor after he does the he puts Strong up on the top turnbuckle, and Strong, I guess, like backdrops him off, and that's when he falls to the floor and hits the apron, and then Strong starts getting the table. That's when it starts getting like to the point where they're doing something special for the pay-per-view. Even just little things like Aries did the heat-seeking missile, but it was shown from behind, which you almost never get. It's always shown from the side. And that was a cool change of pace. Like, nothing that Aries did necessarily, but just the editorial choice made it seem cool. And then, Strong kicking out of the 450, which I'm trying to think of how many times somebody's just straight up kicked out of that move. Usually they'll avoid it somehow, right? But off the top of my head,
not often. Yeah,
I can't think of too many examples. I'm thinking maybe CM Punk did it, but I don't even totally remember about that. And that was obviously a storyline where CM Punk was doing the over-the-top Hulk up in that match where he won the title. But yeah, then they, a bunch of reversals and cradles, and then Aries hitting the ropes and Strong coming off with, I thought, a extra awesome version of the sick kick. And, like you said, that brainbuster through the table to the floor just was pretty crazy. And the all knees 450. Long match. First half was solid. I would say nothing too special, but hard hitting, sometimes a little boring. And then once it got into the dynamic portion near the end, it did turn into a great match with the good drama and the interesting spots. But I still think if I take the match in totality, I would call it very, very good, but not quite great. Still a really good effort, and I definitely agree that it was better than the match they had back at Supercard of Honor.
Yeah, I was very close to basically being exactly where you are right before the final couple big spots. And I was like, well, that just barely notches it. But the incredible listed goals, again, I agree with Wade. These really make the matches and really explain things to me. The listed goal on the graphics that they had for Roderick Strong's goal was prove he is better than Aries, and Aries' goal was prove he is better than Strong. And I feel like without that, what would I have done? I don't know, but thank God it was there. Like, Lenny says, this bugged me a little bit. Lenny Leonard on commentary says, we're finally going to find out who is the better half of this team. And they wrestled earlier in the year. Like, that was another example of them kind of ignoring the past. And I get, it's a more recent match. So this
but also, pay-per-view is its own world, and they have to act like these matches are, like, more special than they are.
Yeah. So going to the newsletters about this match, Dave was the high vote on this, as you might expect given his taste. Dave wrote in the Observer that this was an excellent match from start to finish, 4.25 stars. Wade wrote, really good, well-paced, smartly laid out, crisply executed match, 4 stars. And then Brian Alvarez kind of in a way agreed with you, Matt, because he wrote, Amazingly, the Roderick Strong versus Austin Aries match was actually the one that went way past the point of overkill. A match like that is fine as the main event blow-off of the biggest feud of the year on the biggest show of the year. As a match airing third from the top, it's mind-numbing by the end. They continued kicking out of every move in the world, so finally Aries gave him a brainbuster off the apron through the table. Strong did, in fact, get his brain busted, landing right on his head. That was insane, and I don't ever need to see it again. Aries then hit another 450 for the pin. Worse, it was all knees to the chest. Sweet God, my buddy Vinny said he'd rather be Joe Stevenson than Roderick Strong today. Joe Stevenson was a UFC fighter. Brian still gave this 4 stars. So it's the classic review where you complain, and then you still give it a high review. But I think
which is like the anti-Wade Keller, right?
Yeah.
Where you praise a match and then it's like an oddly low star rating.
Yeah, and I think Brian later said that this is the match that caused his more casual fans to turn against this show, apparently, that he had them over. So I don't think we would go that far. But, like, yeah, there was a little, sometimes, there's a bit of a numbing effect sometimes to some of these matches at some points. But after the match, Prazek says Aries can now claim to be the number 1 contender for the world title, and it's time to go to Dayton, Ohio to see the Briscoes. I even thought that quote was a little weird because Aries on the last show was kind of doing a promo talking about his best of 3 games and kind of talking like winning that would give him a world title shot. And again, I get that these air out of order, but you know, if you're watching the DVD order, it's like, well, now you basically said because he beat Roderick, he's got a world title shot already. But okay, whatever. Now we go to Ohio to the ROH World Tag Team title match. That'd be the Briscoes, Jay and Mark. They successfully defended the titles when they defeated the No Remorse Corps of Davey Richards and Rocky Romero in 18 minutes, 16 seconds when Jay pinned Richards after a springboard doomsday device. So this is another weird example of things happening on the show. Because it was so far ahead and because Mark Briscoe dislocated his ankle and couldn't work matches on this weekend, ROH still want to have their tag team champions work the show. So this is a rare, maybe a first for us. This is a match that aired on a show we haven't covered yet. This actually gets taped on November 30th.
Yeah, like almost 2 full months later.
Yeah, so a unique thing. Matt, what'd you think about this?
So it's interesting because for a while I wasn't totally feeling this match. Like I thought that there was a little bit of awkwardness, like parts where Jay and Davey Richards were like talking and like killing time and figuring out the next spot. There was just a little bit of that like Briscoes back and forth numbing effect. But it took a while, I would say, for them to like turn it on to the point where it was like, okay, we're like going for like a really hot match here. But when they turned it on, wow, they really turned it on. Like, you know, especially, you know, as always, it's after a hot tag, like, Mark got a pretty nice hot tag, and at that point, things just went crazy. You know, Romero doing a lot of cool kneeing Jay out of the ring. Mark coming out in with a springboard, cutting Davey off the top while drop kicking Romero on the way cuttering Davey off the top while drop kicking Romero on the way down, which gets a "This is awesome" chant. Then Richards leaping off the ropes at Mark, and Mark catching him with a super kick on the way down. You know, there was a spot where the No Remorse Corps go for like stereo kicks, but Jay clotheslines Richards over the top rope when he hits the ropes, and then Jay runs back to hit the double team splash mount neck breaker combo on Romero, which was a really great near fall. You know, it's just like the big moves thing. There's a spot where Jay tries to military press Romero, but Richards hits a springboard drop kick. There's a spot where Mark and Richards exchange strikes, and then Richards hits the handspring kick, but Mark immediately counters with a big clothesline, and that's one of the spots where they do where all 4 guys are down, and you get the big ROH chant, and then they do a big like mid-ring strike exchange the crowd goes nuts for. There's a spot where Richards is able to maneuver into tombstoning Mark, and then Romero hits the Diablo armbar on Jay, and the crowd goes nuts for that. I forgot how over the Diablo armbar was in 2007. There's been a lot of really cool spots involving that move, and this was another one of them. And you know, there's a spot where the No Remorse Corps hit a top rope knee strike and powerbomb combination on Jay that Mark breaks up.
there's a spot where Mark hits this crazy suplex on Romero on the floor and then jumps right back in the ring to hit this doomsday device on Richards and gets the win. Like I said, the early part of the match wasn't totally feeling, but they really did turn it on at the end. And it was one of my favorite sequences to a Briscoes match in a while, especially as far as matches that don't involve Steen and Generico. It was basically just a Briscoes fast-paced action match. But, if that's what the goal was, it delivered. Like, I thought that it delivered that hot action that you didn't really get in the early part of the show. And I feel like the show was needing it at that point. So it did the job that it was meant to do, and the crowd really loved it.
This was another 2006-2007 Briscoes match. Like, stop me if you've heard this before. Relentless pace, constant back and forth, very short face and peril section, gets kind of numbing. And I realize we're saying numbing a lot over the last two matches, but the Briscoes really were like these Szechuan peppercorns of pro wrestling, where they're spicy, they're delicious, but they get a little numbing, and they're catching on. I always say, like, what separates the baseline 3.5 stars Briscoes match of this era from the 4-star and above Briscoes match of this era is how long and insane they go in the closing stretch. And I feel like this match shoots right down the middle. Like, if I had to give this a star rating, it'd be 3 3/4 stars, or what I'd call very good. There are spots in this match that it feels like you don't see in every Briscoes tag. You mentioned some of them, like Jay doesn't always do the big flip dive to the floor. He does that sometimes, and he does it here. Like you mentioned, Mark doing the springboard ace crusher all the time, but you mentioned how in this match he does it with the simultaneous drop kick, which, he doesn't do all the time. So, Jay gets drop kicked, like you mentioned, while holding an opponent in a military press. I wish Rocky had come straight down on top of him and landed in a pin. That would have looked even cooler. But as it was, it still looked cool the way it ended up. And I will also say kudos to this Dayton crowd. They were good for the early stages of this match, but they got super loud for the near falls at the end. But I will say to one fan, I don't know if I want to give kudos or a disapproving tut-tut to the fan who shouted, "Don't land on your head," when Mark climbed to the top rope, because I was like, kind of a dick move, but considering his recent history, also kind of good advice. But like, that'd be like if you're driving with someone that got into a car accident recently and like around every corner you're like, "Don't crash the car." Like, maybe just don't be a dick. I don't know. But one other spot I really loved was, Davey is running the ropes to do a running kick, hitting the ropes to do a running kick on Mark, and Jay has been selling on the floor. And the close-up on Davey is so tight that it's a shock when Jay comes bounding onto screen, and he clotheslines him as Davey is hitting the ropes. And I always love a good hidden spot by the cameras where you never see someone enter the ring before you see the spot. And that's something you really can only do in tags and multi-person matches, because any other match, the expectation is the cameras is always going to make sure you see the 2 people involved in the match. But when you have 3, 4, or more people in, you can do spots like that where you zoom in so close on 1 or 2 people that, like, a third person that you forgot was in the match can come back in and surprise you. So I think this is the baseline for what I want on a major match on a pay-per-view. If it was worse than this, I'd be slightly disappointed. If it was better than this match, I'd be pumped. But at this level, this exact level, I feel like I just nod and go, "That will do, pig. That will do." Like, maybe I give a quick wink, possibly a slight tip of my hat, but only a slight tip. That's my review of this match, where it's like little wink, little tip of the cap, like, you did it, you did good.
Wait, hold on. I think I've discovered a new rating system for you, Trevor. This match gets, quote, "a slight tip."
That might not work out without context, but yes, this match gets slight tip.
I feel like it works perfect. Now I need to know what the next match gets.
Oh, God. So, okay, the goals for this match. The NRC's goal was prove NRC our best faction. The Briscoes' goal was keep tag titles in forefront. Again, incredible goals. The Observer reviewed this match by saying, usual Briscoes match where you get tons of great moves, great heat, but they do too much, 3 3/4 stars. Wade Keller writes, this was taped in Dayton, Ohio, a less pay-per-view friendly setting. Really good match, though, 4 stars. And I have to say it to Wade, it didn't look great. It didn't look that much different than New Jersey, and the crowd I thought was pretty hot for the match. So I don't know if I was like, what a downgrade from going from the storied Inman Sports Complex in New Jersey, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, to
Edison, yes.
Edison. I always mix them up. To Dayton, Ohio. Ooh, the horror. But
I actually thought I think the Dayton building looks better.
Yeah, like
personally on video anyway. I don't know. I've never been there. I've been to Inman Sports Club, and it was pleasant to watch. You know, you were sitting in a hockey rink, but the rest of the building was pleasant enough. But on like the actual because it's on video, it just looks very dark. You know, it's just like you're just like in a black curtained off room. But like there's some character to the Dayton building. It has that unique ceiling. So I don't know. Seemed okay to me.
If you want dimly lit crowds, man, wait until we get to our next show because it's going to be a new high.
Yes,
dimly lit crowds.
A new high in low light.
So, Brian Alvarez wrote about this. Of course, ROH has its flaws, most noticeably, a tendency in many matches to just do too much. Usually this occurs in tag matches featuring the Briscoes, but amazingly they were, in terms of Briscoes matches at least, relatively tame this evening, to the point where when their match ended, I was stunned at the restraint. They still did twice as much as they needed to do. Crowd was chanting, "This is awesome." This made me mad. There is so much on the show that has been so much more awesome than this. The crowd watching with me had largely lost interest at this point. Well, they should be here for Impact. They were laughing at all the insanity, and then the Briscoes making hot tags. Things were just randomly happening at one point. Briscoes finally hit the springboard doomsday device on Davey for the pin. I was actually caught off guard that it ended when it did. I expected another 10 to 15 minutes, 3.5 stars. Okay.
What?
Brian Alvarez did have a real bone, a stick in his craw about the Briscoes in this era, but he said 10 to 15 more. I want to remind people, this match went over 18 minutes. Did he really honestly expect that this match was going to go nearly half an hour to 33 minutes?
Also, he knows this was like a timed pay-per-view, and was already watching the clock. Like the show would have been over by the time the match ended.
Because there's almost no Briscoes match up to this point in Ring of Honor history that's gone that long. So this idea they always go half an hour. No, they fucking don't.
It was basically the longest match was probably the one against the Motor City Machine Guns.
Yeah, but generally the Briscoes were probably 15 to 24, 25 minutes but probably more, generally in that, 18, 20-ish sweet spot. But the other thing he said he got mad that people were chanting, "This is awesome" to this match when there were so many better things on the show. First off, this is a completely different crowd than the rest of the show. So they didn't see anything else on the show. Second of all, Brian gave this 3.5 stars. He had given nothing else on the show other than Aries Strong 4 stars. Everything else he had either given 3.5 or less. So when you're saying there's a lot of stuff that was better than this, well, your star ratings don't fucking reflect that, because this was tied for up to this point the second highest rating you gave to anything on the show. So anyway, we moving on. Wade Keller had something. He really wanted to single out the Briscoes here. Again, Wade Keller and Brian Alvarez are like polar opposites, and I feel like if they combined, they would be like the wrestling critic we would agree with. but because Brian's ranting about the Briscoes in a friendly-ish way, but Wade goes the other direction. Wade goes, ROH knows they've got something special with the Briscoes, and they did a good job stressing that ROH, unlike other national groups, put a primary focus on their tag division. It's something that nobody's really done since ECW with Paul Heyman, the way he got over the Public Enemy and the Eliminators, among several others, as center money acts for his promotion. ROH has an opportunity at a niche, and they are smart enough to seize it, and the Briscoes are an act worthy of hyping up as the best of the biz, which, I don't disagree with a lot of that. I will say, Wade hyping up the tag division, I think ROH built the Briscoes. They didn't build the tag division. The tag division is still pretty thin, but they were willing to highlight the Briscoes as a top act in the company. But, it's not like this is a deep division, but I get what Wade is saying.
It feels pretty hard to have a deep division when you have a limited indie size roster also. Yeah. How many tag teams could you realistically have?
Yeah. But there was a lot of times where the tag division was, it felt like for the last 6 months, the tag division was the Briscoes and Steen and Generico. and then some thrown together stuff. But after the match, as we watch the Briscoes celebrate, the video gets interrupted by brief shots of Jay Briscoe being raised in the air at Man Up with a weird color filter over them as static is playing. Eventually, this gives way to shots of the Age of the Fall as backstage at a show as the announcers wonder what is going on. All of a sudden, "Give Me Back My Bullets," the Briscoes theme song, slows to a stop, and we cut to Jimmy Jacobs saying backstage somewhere, "And this is just the beginning." So yes, the Age of the Fall are hackers. Like every stupid cliche from a edgy wrestling stable in this era is now being applied to these guys. They're also hackers.
I'd say every edgy wrestling stable from 10 years before this. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The DDP hidden camera stuff, great stuff. And that brings us to the pay-per-view main event, the ROH World Title match. Nigel McGuinness defeated Takeshi Morishima via pinfall in 14 minutes, 20 seconds after he hit a jawbreaker lariat. Nigel McGuinness becomes the 10th person to hold the Ring of Honor World Championship. This is the third match these two have had together, and their most important. And it also ends up being their shortest in terms of just match time. And I also think, Matt, it's their worst. When we watched their last match at Live in Tokyo, I think I said it was a match between two talented guys that was fairly patterned. They actually did try and do something very different in this match, but in a way that disappointed me. Their execution was off because for a good portion of the first 5 minutes of this match, Morishima is working over Nigel's arm. And that's an interesting idea because Morishima hasn't done much limb work in ROH. He's been the big monster champion, and his strategy has rarely varied because he hasn't needed to try and create weaknesses for his opponents. His existence was his opponent's weakness. And so I'm for trying something different, changing things up. It obviously makes sense that he'd want to stop Nigel's lariats, and it gives something for Nigel to fight through and overcome in this match in theory. But there's some problems because, Morishima works over Nigel's arm like a man who hasn't done much limb work in his life, which is probably true at least in Ring of Honor. It's very unimaginative. It's kind of boring. His limb work on Nigel's arm is like tugging Nigel's arm against a ring post, stomping on it, simple arm bars. And he also works at both arms at different times, which I don't know if that was by design or if Morishima literally just lost track of which arm he was focusing on because he switches from the left to the right at different points. All of it is not very interesting, but I was okay with it because I was like, this could potentially lead to interesting payoffs, like Nigel having to find ways other than the lariat to win the match, or Nigel powering through the pain and dramatically winning with lariats, even though you can tell, his arm's killing him, but he's going to hit the lariat anyway. There's interesting ways this could all pay off. And then instead, after the whole arm work segment in the first 5 minutes of the match, Nigel gets control and he immediately just starts throwing lariats, none the worse for wear, not selling his arm, not in any real visible pain, to the point where Lenny Leonard on commentary literally says, quote, "He shrugged it off," unquote.
He says that Morishima's arm work was, quote, "not as effective as we thought."
And I would agree with that. So, and I've said this before, I don't think if a wrestler gets a limb worked over, they should never be able to use that limb for the rest of a match. But I don't think that should be a hard and fast rule. But my issue is that they spent the first third of this match telling a somewhat dull limb work story. And not only did it not lead to a big payoff in the end, it didn't even lead to a small payoff. It didn't lead to any payoff. They immediately and blatantly ignored it, which makes the first third of this match to me feel like a lot of a waste. And then we move on to, they're also in this match really trying to sell Nigel as the underdog, not the hour dog, powering through. But again, the execution of a good idea here is bad. They do a spot about 6 minutes into this match where they try and do this dramatic Nigel knockout tease where he takes a move and the ref does a standing 10 count and Nigel barely gets up in time at 9. But remember, they did this 6 minutes into a match where a lot of this first 6 minutes was arm work. So it didn't feel earned at all. It felt like pretty much all of Morishima's recent opponents took a lot more offense from him than Nigel had it by this point, and they didn't sell this dramatically this early after having this little done to them. And so it's another element of this match where I kept going during this match, good idea, but you don't seem to know how to execute. Like the idea of doing a dramatic spot like that late in a match where he's been beaten to shit, great. A match where we're not that far into it and he's taken very little high impact offense and he's selling like he's at the end of a 12-round boxing fight. That I didn't love that either. So from there, we do shift though into more of a bomb throwing match, and it does greatly improve at that point. This is where, they're more of their comfort zone. They do a couple little twists even, like Nigel lariats a flying Morishima out of the air. Morishima hits his great running boot to Nigel as Nigel's doing the handstand. Ella, we've seen Samoa Joe do it, but it was still cool to see another guy do it. Morishima takes a superplex, and normally he pops up immediately and no-sells it. I thought it was an interesting twist where he takes the superplex this time and he just stays down. He's taken out by it enough that he can't get up out of it. Nigel even does a sunset flip powerbomb in the corner, which doesn't come across very smooth, but again, I appreciate, you're trying to go a little further, do a little different. But I will say in the third match of a trilogy, especially one where you're building to one guy finally winning the world title from a rival who has beaten him multiple times, you'd like to hope that the third match would be bigger than the previous ones, that would feel epic. And I would say not only does this match feel shorter than their previous two matches, it feels slighter to me. Like, I think I said their first match at Fighting Spirit was very good, and their rematch at Live in Tokyo might have been on the border of very good to great. I don't remember 100%. I think that's what I thought. This match, I would just give a flat good to. It's a step down. And I think it's extra disappointing because Morishima has been on, we've talked about on all these recent episodes, Morishima's been on an absolute tear at this point in his final weeks and months of his ROH title run. And this match is worse than, I'll be interested in what you think, Matt. I think this match is worse than basically all of his recent title defenses. I went down my head. It's worse than the Claudio match. It's worse than the Albright match. It's worse than the three-way with Claudio and Albright. It's worse than the two Danielson matches. And I think it's worse than the Eric Stevens and Steen matches that we just saw. So the best thing this match has going for it is the atmosphere. The crowd knows the title change is possible for this match, and they want to be there for it, and they're pretty hot. And when Morishima kicks out of the first jawbreaker lariat, it's this huge crowd reaction followed by the kind of boos you hear from a crowd where they're like, we're scared we're not going to get the big title change now, which I that's interesting. And I liked hearing that because I knew watch it, well, they're going to get it. And then when they finally do get that world title change, they go appropriate. I would describe it as appropriately nuts. They get very excited for it. They're very loud. And I would say that's the most special thing about this match is what it signifies, not what it actually is. Again, I'm being a little harsh. I think it is a good match, but my hopes were just a lot higher.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with you about all of it. I do think it was the worst of their three matches. I do think it was among the worst Morishima title defenses, especially considering the run he's had of just epic, excellent matches for, what seems like months, but definitely since the summer. And I agree that it was disappointing. I guess you could argue that the story of the match was that Morishima didn't know how to effectively work the arm, but I don't really buy that. I think that they did a thing and ignored it. And the sad part is it's not like I'm mad about the arm work being ignored on some sort of principle. I just think it would have made the match more interesting. If they had actually played off of it. If they had just done spots that played into the fact that Nigel had an injured arm. And then maybe in the very end he still could have won with the jawbreaker lariat, but one last gasp to destroy his arm, but he knew he had no choice. Something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there were so many interesting ways they could have gone and they went with none of them.
Yeah. And it was just sort of and I'm also not someone who's so harsh on the no-selling in general, on the fighting spirit stuff. I could get into that. But they just went so, kind of thoughtless about it here that it turned me off a little bit. And I know that both of them could do better. And I guess it was sort of it's on pay-per-view. People haven't seen our other matches. Let's just do all of our big moves. But then why even do the whole arm work thing in the first place if that was what you were going to do? So yeah, I mean, but yeah, like you said, down the stretch, it was still fun. The crowd was into it, all the no-selling and Nigel popping up after a backdrop driver and hitting the jawbreaker lariat, and the part where they're boxing each other's ears and hitting strikes and slaps, that was cool. All of it's cool in a vacuum. Actually, one of my favorite spots was just when Morishima ducked when Nigel went for the outside the ring rebound lariat, because I don't feel like anyone's ducked that yet. And, that was a good twist. But yeah, when Morishima was doing arm work, I didn't care that like the arm work didn't like look good or was not consistent. I just wanted them to do something with it, and they didn't. So yeah, it was disappointing. Still a good moment. The crowd still went totally nuts when Nigel won. But yeah, not, and I'll talk a little bit about what made that moment a little bit different from other ROH title changes after you talk about what you're going to talk about. But it was still a cool moment. But yeah, they could have done better. They definitely could have done better.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying about like not being a stickler for like limb selling and stuff. Like to me, my internal unofficial rule is like if the limb work is really entertaining in the moment, and then you immediately drop it, I'm okay with it because I can be like, well, at least it was entertaining for what it was. And if the limb work is boring but it leads to a really interesting thing later in the match, I can forgive it being not that good in the moment because I'm like, well, it built to something big. But this match, you can't have it both ways. You can't have limb work that isn't that entertaining that also leads to nothing. We kind of got the worst of both worlds here. But again, the incredible goals for these wrestlers. Nigel's goal was win world title. Morishima's goal was build legacy as champ. And I don't know what casual fans would have done with having those on the screen. But a fair bit of news around this match, and it's a lot of interesting things to talk about along with the review. So we'll go first to Dave Meltzer in the Observer. Dave wrote about this match. McGuinness has been the next person in line for the ROH title for a while, but the date itself was never solid. The original idea was to run an October tour of the UK and have him win it there, but that fell through. McGuinness lost several matches, most notably the pay-per-view match to Bryan Danielson, to set him up for opponents after he won the title. The idea is to build McGuinness versus Danielson as the ultimate match, so that won't be happening for some time. Trevor, note, it happens on the next show. Playing on the idea that McGuinness has never beaten Danielson in ROH. Morishima will still be appearing on major shows throughout 2008, although obviously not as frequently. It won't be like he will miss Noah tours and major events to do U.S. title matches as he did this year. And I'll note here, Morishima, he does come back to do another, double shot this year, but Morishima will only work 4 ROH shows, 2 double shots in all of 2008. 5 shows if you count the one that ROH does in 2008 where they go to Japan. But to me, that's almost cheating to me because he's in Japan. But and Mike Johnson backed Dave up on that because Mike Johnson wrote, Takeshi Morishima will be no longer working for Ring of Honor as a full-time performer, appearing on every event now that he's lost the ROH title, but he's figured the company plans well into 2008, so he'll be around when needed. I was really surprised by how many people asked me if he was done with the company since he dropped the title, and he really is kind of almost done after this. So I don't know if things changed. I know he gets he beats Misawa for the GHC World Heavyweight title in Noah a few months into 2008, which I think but I think that was a long-term known thing. That was the plan. This whole 2007 ROH run was about trying to give him some foreign credit and build him up to take the reins as world champion in Noah in 2008. So I don't know if maybe something got downscaled, but yeah, we're kind of already entering kind of the end of an era for Morishima, although again, we will see him a little bit more. Matt, it breaks my heart that Nigel didn't get the tour of the UK. I don't know why the tour of the UK didn't happen, except for the fact that I think Alex Shane, who was running their first 2 tours, between the second tour and what would have been this third tour, he ended up jumping to TNA and working to do their UK tours, and maybe ROH didn't feel like they could have someone help find another person that could help them arrange that, because the shows generally, I don't know how they did financially, but they did good crowds for Ring of Honor standards, and they were a cool atmosphere. And I just feel like McGuinness has always been snake bitten in certain ways, and we'll see in the coming shows he starts getting a lot of unfortunate injuries. And just when you think about his career ending the way it did, and the blood hepatitis and all the stuff, where I feel like it's another thing where it would have been so perfect for him to finally win the world title in the UK, where on the Ring of Honor's first 2 UK tours, yes, he did win a tag match on the first tour, and he did beat Jimmy Rave on the second tour. But his 2 big matches, he lost in a title unification match to Bryan on the first tour, and he lost to Samoa Joe on that one. It would have been so great if the story was he finally wins the big one in the UK. It would have been great for the pay-per-view. I think that would have been a really cool atmosphere for a pay-per-view for fans who had never seen Ring of Honor much, and I think Ring of Honor on the pay-per-view, you can tell when they're hyping the different places they've gone to, they always want these new fans to know they're kind of a worldly company. I think that would have been great for optics. So I think it's a real shame that he wins the title in, no offense to New Jersey, once again, the Inman Sports Center rather than the Olympia in England.
Okay, well, let me just say that to make this seem a little bit less upsetting for Nigel, New Jersey was named after the island of Jersey, which is in the English Channel. So it's you know what I mean. So it's as close as you're going to get to truly winning the title in England, unless you were winning in maybe, I don't know what, New London, Connecticut.
Yeah, so you're saying if someone was Dutch, if they won in New York, you would point out that used to be New Amsterdam.
Yeah, and also I would also point out, there is a York in England. It's like if you won in regular York.
We're only a little bit tenuous from you're not you wish you had won this title in Italy because you're Italian, but there is an Olive Garden in this town. You're getting drastically close to that level. But I appreciate you trying to cheer him up, man. I'm sure he's a listener.
How many wrestling podcasts have referenced the island of Jersey, or the Isle of Jersey? Well, I don't know what the fuck it's called. It's in the English Channel.
Jersey listeners are going to be real mad at us. But
do we have any listeners? Do we have any listeners that are currently in the English Channel? That's what I want to know.
Let us know. Right in at throughtheyears@gmail.com. So this was known, apparently, this title change for a long time. Dave wrote in The Observer, Nigel McGuinness noted that in a Fight Network radio interview that he heard he was getting the title 6 months to a year ago. So yeah, Gabe was known for his long-term planning on the top-end stuff. And yeah, this was probably, I would imagine, before even... Not only before Morishima won the title, I would wonder if maybe Gabe had this penciled in before Homicide won, if this was going to be the order that things went in.
Yeah, I mean, but, also I feel like a lot of us would have guessed it ourselves at that point, right?
Yeah. Brian Alvarez wrote, Nigel McGuinness beat Takeshi Morishima with his jawbreaker lariat to win the ROH World title. Brian, again, annoying me on the show. He writes, for whatever reason, this went on before intermission as opposed to getting the main event slot. We heard it was in the 3.5-star range, which is below the level you'd expect, I guess. If you had been paying attention to recent ROH pay-per-view tapings, you would know that they had changed to get the pay-per-view done as the first thing on the show to get the optimal, freshest crowd reaction, and then they shoot the DVD portion, afterwards. So, this idea of, Brian be why didn't they make this the main event? Well, use your head a little, man. Use your head. So Dave goes to The Observer. We'll go back to The Observer. Dave writes, the real key here to the strength of this pay-per-view was the title change at the end of the show and how it was handled. It was a very good match, but not a great match. It was the highlight because it wasn't until McGuinness scored the final pinfall and the place exploded that you really see how well they present their title. The place exploded and all the wrestlers came out of the back to celebrate with McGuinness. They treat a title change like it's a rarity and something huge. In doing so, to its audience, it is something huge. The lure of the show is a basic power championship match with mostly simple, hard-hitting moves, but the crowd believes the title is meaningful and reacts accordingly for all the close calls. Morishima isn't flashy or overly charismatic, but he's a great worker and came across like a dominant Vader champion, but one of more wrestling ability and mobility. He works as a bully, but in doing so, gets over his smaller opponents because he doesn't eat them up, and he sells their offense like it means something. The match was a lot of clotheslines and backdrops, but they brought you into the simple story of whether McGuinness could finish such a powerful guy with his lariat, delivering it over and over in the match. Dave gives this 3 3/4 stars. I don't know, Matt, if you want to talk yet. You said you had some thoughts about the way this title change was different. I will say Dave really put it over. This is another example, I think, of people that drop in for certain shows where I think in a vacuum, it was a pretty nice ovation. But I would say compared to the other recent title changes, world title changes for ROH, this did not feel as cathartic and long awaited and dramatic as the Homicide title change, or even like the Danielson one, which came out of nowhere, I feel like was more of a sellout. I don't know. This, for some reason, this one felt slightly anticlimactic to me.
Well, I've been talking about how they'd cooled Nigel off a bit. You know what I mean? Like over the summertime, and he was not in featured big feuds and stuff. Like, I feel like if he had won coming off, like, let's say the Jimmy Rave feud, or back, when they first wrestled in April. Not that I'm thinking that they should have done that, but I feel like he had more momentum then, or even, I don't know about if winning in Tokyo would have been a good idea, but if he had won in America around the time that the Tokyo match happened, that would have come off as a bigger deal that had been built to more. But this just felt kind of like, oh yeah, Nigel, he's a championship contender. We forgot.
Yeah.
That's sort of how it felt at this point. The other thing that made this title win different is because of the pay-per-view, they sort of had to have an abbreviated celebration and rush off the air. Whereas in the past, everybody except for Morishima had an extended celebration, got to do mic work right after they won, all that stuff. So it was a little bit different than what ROH's tradition was. And I remember saying when he won the first time, it's like, okay, well, obviously I expected Nigel to be champion at some point, and this will be different because it's been a long time since there's been an extended babyface run with the title because, Homicide left quickly and Danielson turned heel almost immediately. But little did I know that obviously the pattern would continue because it seems like ROH fans don't like to cheer their world champion, at least not in the 2000s, because he turned heel pretty quickly after this too. So this title reign became pretty different than what I expected it to be.
Yeah, so for the other newsletter reviews, Wade Keller wrote, the crowd was frenzied for the near falls, ending with a jawbreaker by Nigel, 4 stars. Brian Alvarez wrote, Morishima needs something to make him a bit scarier. With the plain trunks and the plain boots and the fat body, he's missing something. He needs a Vader mask or a necklace made of human skulls or shark teeth on his tights.
Oh my God.
Something intimidating.
Oh my God.
You should have heard... Go on.
No, could you imagine just having writing this in with a straight face? Because Wade Keller wasn't being silly. I've heard enough of Wade Keller to know he's being serious.
No, this was Brian Alvarez.
I'm sorry, Brian Alvarez. I guess Brian Alvarez was then being silly, probably. But just the idea of being he needs a necklace of skulls.
And Brian continues, you should have heard the pop for the title change. All the baby faces for this title change, all the baby faces hit the ring and threw a big celebration afterwards. And it was a great moment to get this over as a major company changing event. Great world title match, 3 3/4 stars. So yeah, they all liked it a bit more than us, I think. But
that said, 3 3/4 stars is disappointing for an ROH pay-per-view main event.
Exactly. And the third crack between two talented wrestlers, you think you're building on your past but immediately after the match, the crowd continues to go nuts, and the crowd waves their rally towels. A bunch of babyfaces rush the ring, and Kerry Stuffing gets in too as the crowd chants for Nigel. As Nigel's announced new world champion, Bryan Danielson barges in and gets in his face. Aries tries to stop him, but Bryan pie faces both Aries and Nigel, who both have to be held back as Bryan leaves the ring. At this point, Morishima has recovered and takes the world title belt from the ref so he can present it to Nigel himself. The two men bow to each other and shake hands, and Morishima raises Nigel's hand as the crowd chants, "Thank you, Shima." Aries shakes Nigel's hand and raises his arm. The pay-per-view ends with Nigel posing on the turnbuckles. I will say, this is going to be the image for the show. There is an amazing moment where Morishima is handing the title to Nigel and bowing to him, and Julius Smokes is in the ring, perfectly framed between the two of them, doing his crazy Julius Smokes smile. And he's just staring at, and when you see this, it is an amazing image. If you don't get the images on your podcast feed, find a way to look at it, because it is one of the better images we'll have in recent times for this show.
I'm very excited. But okay, what did you think of the whole Danielson thing? Do you think it was a little bit kind of, I don't know. I mean, obviously it was inconsistent, but do you think it was just a little bit too inconsistent to have him become such a babyface recently and still do this totally heelish thing after Nigel's title win?
Yeah, and I think it's another example on this pay-per-view of Gabe trying to cram in these angles for the next show, which is like, oh shit, we can't just go end the show on Nigel's world champion. We have to remind you, well, the future direction is Brian Nigel, and it's Brian Aries, and Aries is involved with Nigel eventually too, and all this stuff. So
yeah, the next pay-per-view is Aries against Nigel.
But that's the funny thing. If you just watch the pay-per-views, you would think, oh, the next pay-per-view is going to be Brian versus Nigel. No, it's Aries versus Nigel, and Aries is like sticking up for Nigel on this show at the end. So
yeah, the next time that Danielson gets a pay-per-view title shot, it's like over a year from this event. Yeah.
And now I think we can talk a bit about more. I have some kind of big picture thoughts about Morishima's world title reign. So first, we'll go to the torch. Wade wrote, regarding Morishima's legacy as ROH world champion, Sapolsky says he believes Morishima's reign will stand the test of time. Quote, I think Morishima's title reign will really stand the test of time, and that is the true sign of a great way to sum up the quote. That's the exact quote. Will really stand the test of time, and that is the true sign of quality, he says. Everyone got over wrestling him and was stronger when the match was over than when it began, even if they were going under. I really enjoyed his entire reign and wouldn't mind seeing another. So my thoughts about this are this, which is like, with Morishima's title reign over, I thought it was really interesting to think about because it's really a tale of two reigns to me. There's the early Morishima reign where I feel like Gabe tried to push him as this dominant monster, and I really appreciate Gabe trying something different for his world champ because even though you could argue Samoa Joe was dominant, it was a different kind of dominant than Morishima worked at first. And I think Morishima early in the title reign did a good job of finding that exact line of being dominant enough to look like a monster, but giving his opponents just enough to have an entertaining competitive match. But it didn't seem like the fans loved it, maybe because it wasn't what they were used to. But you did see in the newsletters looking back a lot of live reports saying, oh, Morishima's not getting over at first and stuff like that. And Gabe telling the newsletters it'll take some time. But then we got the second section of the Morishima title reign where it feels like they kind of abandoned the idea of him being uber dominant in the matches and allowed him to bump and sell way more for his opponents. Like, he still came off as a monster, but I think what I said on an earlier episode is that this version of Morishima was like a boss in a video game who you could hit him easily, but he had this giant health bar, and one blow from him, meanwhile, would take off like a fifth of your health bar. So he was still a scary monster, but not in that he won quick or got all the offense in the match, but he was scary in that he could take a ton of punishment and then destroy you with just a few big moves at the end. And I think the Shingo match was the first that kind of unlocked that style of Morishima and ROH. But by the end of his reign, that was most of the kinds of matches he was having. And the fans definitely seem to like those matches more. I feel like even just watching the DVDs, you can feel, even not being in the crowd, you can feel the sentiment around him shifting through the crowd reactions over the shows. And so, to me, when I think about Morishima, I think about the rookies in real sports that people call toolsy. And for those who don't know what that means, when you call someone toolsy in like athletics, that usually means these are people that have all these natural gifts that you can't teach, like they're incredibly fast or incredibly big or really agile or super strong. And a lot of times teams in sports will draft these guys even if their games aren't complete and their stats aren't great, because there's this thought that they have all these amazing attributes that you can't teach. So if they could just learn the best, they'll be really special. And some of those toolsy athletes do learn the rest of their sports and they become huge stars. And other of these toolsy athletes, they never learn the fundamentals or never pick them up, and they never even make the major leagues. And when I look at Morishima, well, when I think everyone first looked at Morishima, including Misawa with Noah and Gabe Sapolsky when he put the title on him in ROH, I feel like everyone looks at him, Morishima, and feels like you feel like a sports team scout seeing a toolsy future star where you go, he's got this combination of size and agility that is so rare. And there's these moments where he flashes this intimidating monster energy, not all the time, but sometimes. And you look at all that, and people at the time looked at all that and thought, if this guy could ever put it all together, he could be the heavyweight that no one needs, the replacement for Misawa and Kobashi. In ROH, he could be the new Samoa Joe or even the new Kenta in terms of like the foreign draw for us on the U.S. Indies. And I would say he never quite got there, but I also wouldn't describe him as a flame out who realized none of his potential. To me, he falls somewhere in the middle. And I think when it comes to Morishima, he put it all together sometimes, and other times he just showed his tools. And even matches where he just showed his tools were pretty decent. But I have seen people, especially people who saw more of his Japan work, who felt like often he just had something missing. I know some people there point to his facial expressions or that he just wasn't connecting quite enough with the crowd. But what I think is that Morishima was a guy who needed other people to bring the best out of him. Like, there are wrestlers who bring the best out of their opponents, and then there are wrestlers who need someone to bring their best out of them. And Morishima, to me, was definitely the latter. Like, with the first Danielson match, we read that excerpt from Brian's book where he literally talked about having to actually hurt Morishima a little bit, literally like stiff him to get him to work the way he, not just that he wanted Morishima to work, but the way he knew that Morishima was capable of working. And that's an extreme example, but I feel like we saw the best of Morishima when we saw people really take it to him and force him out of his comfort zone. And to kind of sum up my thoughts, I will say, I might be the first person to make this comparison, but to me, Morishima reminds me a little bit of Sting in some ways. And what I mean by that is Sting had natural gifts too. He was a very good athlete. He was a great athlete before he had an injury in the 90s. And then even after that, he was a very good athlete. And he had a great natural charisma. And when you paired him up with the right opponent, like Vader or Cactus Jack or Ric Flair, he had matches where not only were they fantastic matches, he wasn't just being carried. He was an active contributor to why they were fantastic. But at the same time, if you put Sting in the ring with an average wrestler, Sting was never elevating that average wrestler to a match that was special. Where on the other end, a guy like Cactus Jack could carry Van Hammer to a really good match in the early 90s. Or Ric Flair made a whole career off of carrying people to matches that were way better than you would think they would normally have. And there are wrestlers who need to be unlocked, and there are wrestlers who do the unlocking. And while I would never call Morishima a bad wrestler by any means, I wouldn't even reduce him down to an athlete who was nothing but tools and an unrealized potential. I do think what no one needed and wanted from Morishima was a guy who could do the unlocking for other wrestlers on their roster, and Morishima wasn't that. I think they wanted a Ric Flair and they got a Sting. That's the way I would kind of sum up Morishima.
Well, you have a lot more to say about him than I do, just because I think you've seen a lot more of his Japan work. Like, not that I haven't seen any, but I certainly don't have a lot to say about it. Like, the vast majority of my Morishima experience comes from what we've reviewed already, and some of the matches that are to come. And I think I've said a lot about how I feel about his run. Like, I think he had I think a legendary run of matches there, especially toward the later end of his title run, and they were different than other ROH title reigns, and they did get the best out of a bunch of guys. I mean, when was Brent? I mean, like I said, there's one other match, but when was Brent Albright ever more over than he was during that match in Philadelphia? Eric Stevens too, and it was honestly probably an early peak for Claudio as well, who obviously went on to do many great things in wrestling, but high on the list of Bryan Danielson's best matches. I don't remember where I ranked it on our top 10 list, but it was in there. And that's pretty impressive run right there. And yeah, I see that in Japan he didn't live up to what people wanted him to be. But I feel like, I don't know what he would say now, but as far as like highlights of his career and how he feels about his ROH run, but I feel like there's a lot of really positive things you could say about how he performed in ROH. And, it's a shame that he couldn't replicate that as his career continued. But not a lot of wrestlers ever had a run the way he had in this short little brief period in ROH. So, I hope he doesn't feel too bad about it.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully we can make him feel happy one day when he listens to the show, as all wrestlers do. But so before we get our thoughts on the pay-per-view portion, then we'll go quickly into the 3-match. It's only a 3-match paper DVD section, but we'll go to, I guess, what the newsletters thought of the pay-per-view as a whole. Dave Meltzer, the 4th ROH pay-per-view show, Undeniable, is a little different from the previous 3. The first half of the show almost runs like a television show, with quick matches and an attempt to get a lot of personalities over. But the second half has 3 long and very good matches. It's all the usual positives and negatives of an ROH presentation. The wrestling, announcing, and crowd reactions are great. The booking makes complete sense. The production looks cheap compared to what you're used to, and a lot of the guys don't quite look like what people have been educated most of their lives as to what stars are supposed to look like. It's a rabid crowd, crowd, most in their 20s, almost all male. You have to work hard to get them. But once they are there, they are into it. Into everyone who works hard. It seemed almost like an education process early to the characters and trying some new things in finishes. Overall, the show was good. It wasn't like Man Up, where you have one of the best pay-per-view shows of the year, if not ever. It didn't have a match that would be in a match of the year running, but it was still far better from a wrestling standpoint than anybody else in North America is going to do on all but their very best shows. Wade Keller would say, ROH is hitting its stride in areas where it was weak with the first couple pay-per-views. The production values are still several steps below TNA and WWE, but not enough to take away from the enjoyment of the action. There's even an underground charm to the atmosphere. It's the overmodulating of the house mic that is most distracting and bush league sounding. The athleticism, crowd passion, character development, and announcing more than makes up for it, though. This pay-per-view closed with 3 solid 4-star matches in a row. I wouldn't peg any as top match of the year candidates, but collectively it made for a great final hour of the show. With 3 other matches near or above 3 stars, the wrestling quality on this was what it needed to be a strongly recommended show. The first hour, with the segments involving Larry Sweeney, Age of the Fall, and Adam Pearce, gave enough non-wrestling content to the pay-per-view to make it feel closer to what an ROH TV show might feel like, which is a good thing. Those who want a ton of in-ring wrestling get plenty packed into this 2-hour slot, and a choice of tons of DVDs. But for the pay-per-view audience, it's smart to mix in more promos and angles. This show had a good mix. Mike Johnson would say, from top to bottom, there wasn't one bad match on the entire pay-per-view, and the final 2 matches were especially excellent. Thought it was a strong, entertaining in-ring product for top to bottom. It's amazing to see how all of the performers in the company have gotten in the last year, as well as the marked improvement in so many of the names. And then Brian Alvarez finishes by saying, the ROH Undeniable pay-per-view was no Man Up, but that's not a bad thing since very few pay-per-views in history have been that good. It was, as is always the case with ROH, a fine alternative to TNA and WWE, and well worth the $14.95 I spent on it. I watched the show with a full house, several who came over after watching UFC 80 earlier. They're all wrestling and MMA fans, mostly watching Raw and SmackDown and occasionally TNA. It was very interesting to observe the reactions. They loved guys like Larry Sweeney and were really into the show early because it was so different. But the Strong vs. Aries match killed them. It was just too much, and near the finish, which was one long series of moves, perhaps longer than the Heat segment, they actually began to make fun of it, asking why none of these moves seemed to hurt. Between that and the Briscoes match, they lost interest. One of them pretty much gave up on the show during the main event, which was too bad because I thought it was a great world title match. ROH in some ways reminds me of ECW. ECW was an alternative, and it was a perfect alternative for ECW fans. The problem was, you couldn't bring that alternative up to the big stage because that was not the kind of alternative that appealed to the masses. It's the same with ROH. Their fans love the Briscoes, and they love matches like Strong vs. Aries, which, don't get me wrong, I can recognize as a very good match. But for the masses, which have been weaned on WWE, it's too much. There is a major difference between ROH and ECW, though. ECW had an alternative that did not appeal to the masses, and they still tried to bring this product to them. ECW and TNN largely did sub 1.0 ratings, plus they were spending way more money than they were taking in. That's a surefire recipe for failure. ROH, on the other hand, is not looking to bring this product to the masses. Sure, they're using this low-risk pay-per-view venture to try and attract some new viewers, but the point is that if this fails, they're not going out of business. They have a product that appeals to their fan base and is allowing them to be mildly profitable. If they can do better, great. But right now they are content surviving as a somewhat profitable enterprise and not risking it all by trying to conquer the world. There is nothing wrong with that. So, Matt, any thoughts about that, and what did you think about the pay-per-view?
Well, the profitable thing, like, it's amazing how long that was people who were journalists bought into that. When actually, if you really just looked at it, it didn't make any sense, right? Like logically speaking, like, how could this be making money, right? Like,
they were jumping to pay-per-view because they weren't profitable. And when Brian talking about, like, they didn't want to bring this to the masses, within like a little year plus, they will be jumping to TV because they feel like they need to grow the crowd to financially make this work.
Right. As far as the pay-per-view, though, like, I mean, I don't agree with Dave that, like, it had all of the strengths and weaknesses of a usual ROH show. I think it had some weaknesses that it usually didn't have, and I don't think all the booking made sense. So I think that this was obviously the weakest ROH pay-per-view so far. There was just in my opinion, like, I think everyone was trying to look at this from an angle that we criticize now when people try to, like, talk about alternatives to WWE by saying, like, oh, we're going to appeal to the casual audience and, you know, make it more like a TV show, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know, so maybe this is just 2026 mindset of just like, no, it was when ROH was at its best, it was when it was totally different than what was on TV. And this had a little bit too much of what was on TV. And then when you talk about the top matches, they were all good, but they were less good than the top matches on the other pay-per-views. And I would say less good overall than the best matches from the non-pay-per-view match we saw the night before. So this was a weaker than normal ROH show. Yes, the in-ring was better than what you saw every week on TV and every month on pay-per-view from TNA and WWE. But for us, for ROH fans, it was on the weaker end. So, yeah, still entertaining show, but I don't think a particularly great pay-per-view at all.
Yeah, I agree. This was the worst of the ROH pay-per-views thus far. It was still a good, enjoyable show. There was nothing on this show that did not entertain me. But yeah, the matches on top, maybe a slightly disappointing. And, Wade really liked the idea that they changed, that they tried to make the first half more of a TV style, like lots of angles, lots of shorter things. I don't like that. I agree with you when you said before that ROH was selling wrestling dense, and I always fear the idea of we have to appeal to the masses by becoming like an imitation of the masses. I feel like you build your audience by like look at it this way. The way Brian wrote his little thing, he was talking almost like, ROH fans will like the Briscoes, but they would never make it. The style of wrestling, the ROH, that all these guys were saying is too much back then, is commonplace today, even sometimes in WWE. Like, it takes time, but that stuff, this idea of what fans can't and can't handle or won't want, or what's too much for them, that shifts over time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's give the example here of like, because I feel like the closest thing that you would say would be like, where it comes to like the underground or alternative style that becomes popular, music, right? Like the 80s into the 90s, you take a band like R.E.M. Let's just say R.E.M. was a, relatively high level but underground band in the sense that, it was, written about by critics. It drew respectable sales and audiences, occasionally would pop up on like a Letterman or something, but the average high schooler did not know who R.E.M. was through most of the 80s. Then by like, the late 80s, they were mainstreaming their sound a little bit, but it was still totally different than everything else that was popular. But they were starting to become more popular. They were starting to gain some ground. And by the time the 90s hit, they didn't turn into Bon Jovi, or whoever else was popular at the time. Just the mainstream changed and came to them. And that didn't happen for every underground band that was good. Like there were plenty of bands that just stayed on the level they were in back then and stayed underground. But if underground is ever going to become popular, it has to just do its thing and evolve in its own way. And maybe the mass audience will come to it. It probably won't, but at least it will stay appealing to the people that liked it in the first place and not just drive everyone off by being a complete imitation of something more popular.
I think that absolutely nails it in a way better way than I ever could put it, because I think you're saying like people coming to them, like that's the perfect way to put it, Matt, because how many times on this show through the years have we read stuff from the newsletter saying like CM Punk is really good, but he won't make it in the mainstream. Bryan Danielson won't make it in the main. He's great for where he is, but that won't be for the mainstream. Kevin Steen doesn't have the right look for the mainstream. And all those guys made little changes when they jumped to like WWE and modifications, but they were like R.E.M. where the mainstream made far more caveats and came far more into them than they did towards the mainstream. Like they changed far less than the mainstream's taste towards them changed.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the point. It's like, don't cave. Be great. And if you're great, it's not always going to happen, but the greatness eventually finds the mass audience if you have faith in it and if it's truly great sometimes. And it gets really annoying watching. And today, like you mentioned, like it's still conversations happening today with wrestling where it's always like if something's not successful, it needs to be more like the number one promotion. That's not typically where the new number one comes from. It's the new idea that wins over time. And it's crazy reading this stuff, again, like, oh, this won't work. This style won't work. This is too much for modern fans. Not if you give them time.
Yeah, and even if it is like it, the even if it stays too much for modern fans, you're still not going to beat the people that you're imitating. You're just not.
Exactly.
So like, there's no benefit to it, and the small outside chance that you may get inroads into changing things to rebuild it in your image goes away. So you just get nothing. In that case, you don't even have the people that liked you in the first place at that point.
Yeah. And I think R.E.M. again is the perfect comparison because, like, yeah, they made some caveat, some little conceits to when they went more mainstream, but like, yeah, when I saw my 6th grade school teacher, props to Mrs. Sinclair, my favorite teacher, had a copy of Automatic for the People, like behind her desk, that was her coming towards R.E.M. way more than R.E.M. was coming towards her.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's a great way to put it. I guess the last thing I'll say about the pay-per-view review is I will just say, like I said before, I think a sign of the show is a lot of cracks starting to show up, but also what I would say is something ROH does at this point, which I think is a flaw, is if you want to try something different, go all the way or don't do it all. I don't like the idea of we're going to appeal to women by doing a 3-minute woman.
I know.
We're going to appeal to new viewers by doing the most basic, bland 5-word, 1-line listed goals for every wrestler on the show. Like, either really go out of your way to do something big, or don't do it. Like, don't do these half measures. They don't work.
Yeah.
You know.
And second important point. You know what they call R.E.M. fans?
R.E.M. fans?
Berry
heads?
Deep vein thrombosos. Don't even get me started on what they call people who love R.E.M. and Harriet Tubman.
Jesus. Okay, so as always on the show, we also cover the DVD portion. The DVD portion of this time was a little over an hour, but it was only 3 matches. So we'll start off with, if you bought the DVD, and these matches all got taped after the pay-per-view portion, Claudio Castagnoli defeated Jigsaw via pinfall in 12 minutes, 22 seconds after he hit a pop-up European uppercut. Matt, what did you think about this match?
Okay, well, first of all, so in the storyline, they say that Claudio was being taken to the hospital, and he demanded that the ambulance be turned around because he wanted to compete. And I would say, by the looks of him, I think it was a good call because he definitely didn't need to go to the hospital because he was like totally fine and fresh looking and athletic and just very healthy seeming.
You mean you're thinking that this guy that they said had feared he had a broken orbital bone that had no swelling or marking around his face at all might have been doing pretty well?
Yes, it was a good call to turn the ambulance around. And then you get to a weird sequence where Lenny Leonard is mocking the idea of, like, he was like, how did we know? Did like a helicopter follow this ambulance? And then they both do this whole riff on Lance Wright, and they're like, whatever happened to Lance Wright? And Dave Prazak's like, oh, he was a victim of too much hype. And I was like, what is the story behind this? Do you know what the story behind this is?
Lance Wright was like a very niche.
Oh no, I know who Lance Wright is. I mean, do you know what they're talking about and why they're going after him here?
I think it was a reference that they riffed on, and I think you can really see the very clear delineation between how they announced the pay-per-view portion and how probably like late in a taping weekend they announced the DVD portion, where they are clearly like loosening their ties and not giving a shit quite as much about like pressing and selling everything to the highest degree of seriousness.
Yes, okay, but not to sorry to cut you off, but yeah, Lance Wright was the ECW guy, right? Like.
Yeah.
Yes,
he was like an interview guy that was kind of like, I think, a parody of like Bruce Pritchard or something.
Just very odd that they were like deciding to go after him in this moment. It just felt like out of nowhere. Anyway, Claudio and Jigsaw are 2 guys that come from Chikara, and they obviously have worked together a lot. So we get a lot of this stuff with Claudio being as we all like to call him, the base for Jigsaw, and there are a ton of spots like that. I'd say one of the most fun spots actually comes early in the match when Jigsaw hits the ropes and Claudio just does a leaping crossbody, like not off the top, just like standing doing rope running, which you don't see very often, and it's shot from a cool angle that makes it look more interesting than typical crossbody, so I thought that was cool.
He also does a pretty good giant swing, of course. At one point in the match, there's a spot where Claudio goes up and, where Jigsaw escapes the Ricola bomb and through the legs and goes for a big spinning head scissors, but Claudio just slams him face first to the mat and hits a bicycle kick. There's a spot where Jigsaw gets lifted all the way onto the top rope and then jumps backwards into a Rana on Claudio, which was very cool. So it's just like a lot of cool, like, Chikara-ish spots. And eventually, when Jigsaw hits the ropes, Claudio just throws him up and does the pop-up uppercut for the win. I would say, though, that the match was really only out of second gear for like maybe a minute. These two definitely could have had a better match in them, and there really wasn't anything in the way of psychology. It was almost like one of those matches where these two were just like reciting a dance they already knew, but not really bringing much new into it. And, the dance is good, so the match was fun to watch, but the match, it wasn't memorable or didn't reach a particularly high level, I would say.
Yeah, even though this is a match between two babyfaces, I felt like Claudio wrestled the first two-thirds almost like a heel. Like, not that he was cheating or being a dick or anything, but he was grounding Jigsaw a lot, and whenever Jigsaw started hitting some offense, Claudio quickly cut him off. And I do think when you talk about the match only very shortly getting out of second gear, I feel like that's kind of what was putting it in that first gear for a lot of it. It did have the side effect of eventually getting Jigsaw a little bit of sympathy. The crowd does start chanting for him at a couple points. That might have also been due to some prompting from Julius Smokes and Jack Evans at ringside, which we don't see. The camera doesn't show them when they're making the chants, but it also, it made the first two-thirds of the match not exactly exciting, but in those moments in the first two-thirds where they do let loose a little in the back third, I thought it was a lot of fun. Like you mentioned, some of the fun spots, and these are two Chikara boys. As you said, Claudio is a great base, and they do a bunch of spots that really revolve around good body control, where Jigsaw's rotating in the air around Claudio, and they hit all of them. And there are a few where it looks like they just barely pull them off, but they pull them all off, all the ones they attempt. And it's extra impressive because Jigsaw's a lanky boy, Claudio's a tall guy, and they're doing spots reserved usually for shorter people. And I just thought when you do those kind of rotation ranas and stuff, and you're doing it when you got so much limb flailing around, I thought that was really, really good looking. I would put this match on the border of above average and good, but to me, the problem is the booking. And this is where we talked about this earlier, and this is where it really started to bug me, which is the Vulture Squad just got together, and they're already losing. In this case, to a guy we were told was on his way to the hospital an hour earlier. Like, I can tell you that going forward, you're going to see the Vulture Squad lose a lot more. And Gabe, I think, is repeating one of his mistakes from his resilience, which is having a new stable lose too much too soon. And, like, this isn't hard. Like, when a new stable is formed, they should go on a winning streak to establish themselves right away. And I get you have a limited sized roster, and you have to balance wins and losses and other obligations. And because you've launched 5 stables in a relatively short period of time, and 3 of those stables in a super short window of time, that it's difficult to give them all wins simultaneously. But to me, that's an argument for not starting 5 damn stables at the same time.
Yes, exactly,
maybe you shouldn't have done that. Like if you had one stable at this time, I'm sure it would be easy for Gabe to find one match or two on every card that they could win. But instead, you now have all these mid-card stables he needs to juggle to try and get over simultaneously while still having his bigger names who aren't in stables get their own wins. And clearly it's too much for him. He doesn't have enough wins to go around. And so we're getting stuff like this now. And, there is one moment I want to bring out. This was the highlight of the match to me is I've talked before, especially about how Vulture Squad was full of people I like that were talented, but they did not go together as a stable. They had no cohesion. There is a spot on this match that perfectly encapsulates that. During this match, Jigsaw randomly points to Julius Smokes and says, "I love this guy." And the camera cuts to Julius Smokes, who, I swear to God, looks so embarrassed. Like, he's not like, "Yeah, that's my guy." He looks mortified. And then either Jigsaw or Evans, I don't know who, shouts, "No homo, no homo," in what I think was a legitimate state of mild panic. Like it wasn't a child. Like they got, like, everything went wrong. I feel like if you want to sum up the Vulture Squad, it's that moment.
So, like, Julius Smokes was just, like, so homophobic that Jack Evans had to, like, panic to make sure that he didn't think that Jigsaw was really trying to hit on him? Is that what was going on?
Well, I also think maybe just like Smokes doesn't like Smokes maybe isn't the kind of guy who thinks it would be cool for another wrestler to literally say "I love you" in the middle of a match. Like he probably wants something that's a little more homicide-like, and not a guy going "I love this guy" and then just cuts to him and like, "What are you doing?
Okay,
please don't do this." So that brings us to our second DVD exclusive, and this is a loser leaves ROH for 60 days match.
Which wasn't built up at all, and nobody did a promo about. I feel like we just take for granted that this happens in ROH, but that's a pretty heavy stip. We should probably hear their thoughts about it and know that it's happening, right? I mean, okay. Just make it sure.
I think someone even might have, I forget, someone on Live Report, I'm not sure, might have even complained that they didn't announce the stip to the fans live. It was they really didn't treat this like it was a big deal. You're completely right there. But it was the no remorse core of Davey Richards and Rocky Romero defeating the resilience of Eric Stevens and Matt Cross in 17 minutes even when Romero pinned Cross after a knockout kick to the head. So speaking of stables that got chopped out, hey, it's the resilience. The stipulation, to be clear, the stipulation of this match is the loser of the fall, not the losing team. Just the person that takes the fall has to leave the ROH for 60 days, which I felt was kind of adorably quaint for an indie because being gone 60 days at this time, I looked it up, means you would miss a whopping 6 shows, which is not nothing, but it's also not an end of the world stipulation, right? It's not you're gone forever. But it is kind of a weird stip in that when you think about it, it incentivizes tag teams to not work together because I would just be hell, I just won't tag in then. I'm not going to risk taking the fall. You can take the fall. I'm going to sit this one out. But
tag team, but we just established that people in stables love each other, and
exactly.
And so right. They would not do that. Yeah.
So this match, I felt does a lot of reconfirming things that you already know. So Matt Cross is a great athlete who was missing some charisma and some kind of intangible spark, at least in ROH. We see that here again. Eric Stevens does a fun hot tag. We've seen that a lot. We see that here again. And these two teams, I would say, have the exact match you'd expect from them. Basic structure and pacing that you've seen from a million ROH mid-card tags of this era. A lot of action. I sometimes miss more overt stories and emotion from matches like these, and sometimes I don't. But I did really miss it with this one. Because in theory, like you said earlier, this is a match with something of significance at stake, and they don't act I would say that they don't act like it extends to the wrestlers in the match. We can argue how significant missing 6 shows would really be, but I imagine when Gabe booked this, he would want you to think it was. And none of these 4 guys wrestle in a way that would make you feel like there's anything major on the line at all. In fact, other than the post-match shenanigans, which we'll get into, they don't even wrestle in a way that would let you know that these two teams have been feuding for months. Romero and Davey are kind of dicks, but in the generic way, a heel team is kind of dicks to everybody. So to me, this felt like this could be any 2007 competent, decent, but forgettable ROH mid-card tag, except at one point in this match, I felt like it was ramping up and probably entering its last 2 minutes. And I looked at the time and it had more 7 minutes left. And I think that was a good thing, actually, because they don't do anything more with the extra time than just do a longer stretch run of bigger moves. But I think that elevated this match a little bit. We got a whole sequence where Stevens and Cross pop off just a bunch of cool double teams back to back to back. They do this simultaneous spear and clothesline to Romero in the corner, which I thought was cool. Cross moonsaults onto Romero as Stevens holds him in a backbreaker position. And then Stevens clotheslines Romero as Cross has him in a crucifix. And once he takes that clothesline, Cross uses that momentum to flip Romero into crucifix driver. And they do these bam, bam, bam. I thought, wow, this is some really kind of killer tag offense you're breaking out really late in the lifespan of this stable. And then Davey does a fucking shooting star press from the top turnbuckle to the floor. Davey does standard shooting star presses, but I don't know if he had done one to the floor before in ROH. If he had, it was rare. And I know Mark Briscoe does these, but I wasn't expecting it from Davey, and he's a thicker guy, so it was a bit of a holy shit surprise. So overall, I'd say this was a good match. Maybe watching this show in one sitting, which I didn't do, your enjoy of it might be a little, again, numbed by the fact that you would have seen Davey and Rocky have a similar style match a little over an hour earlier. But I felt this was good enough. But if the resilience wasn't dead already, Cross not just losing completely clean, but in a way where he is knocked out and has to be helped to the back, it wouldn't have done them any favors, I don't think. So, what did you think about this?
Yeah, I think I liked it a little bit less than you. I mean, there were definitely some very cool spots there, but the crowd was tired. And I think the match tried to be something more than it was. And I think it was emblematic of the feud in general, which is just like they tried, but like Cross, I felt like even though he did some very cool stuff, there were also moments where he felt maybe like he lost a little bit of his confidence based on the booking. Like there were a couple of pretty notable botches from Cross. Like Richards went for a suplex at one point that Cross tried to escape out the back, but instead Cross just like flopped to the mat and Richards had to like improvise and just sort of mock him while he was on the mat. And, it was pretty sad timing for Cross to make that sort of error. And then there was another spot where Cross comes up from behind Richards and tries to do a reverse Rana, and it just goes totally wrong. Not totally wrong in the sense that anybody got hurt, but it just looked terrible. And it was just like, then they quickly go, that was supposed to be the part of the match where everybody is down and the crowd's supposed to give a good ovation, but because of the botched spot, they didn't really give the ovation. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I felt bad for Matt Cross here. I just thought the stars were not aligning for him. Even though, again, some of the spots he did were really cool. Like, it's not like he messed up everything, but it just wasn't working out for him. I still think that Richards and Romero have become a very fun team, and I think Romero is one of the more underrated guys during this era of ROH. He's really so much better than he was in the matches that we saw with the Havana Pitbulls that would get a lot more hype. He's always does something that gets the crowd really into it, whether it's the knee strikes. I don't remember him doing the Diablo armbar in this one, but he did a lot of cool stuff. And Stevens, for his part, did some cool spots. Like, for instance, when he took Richards, he Oklahoma stampeded Richards into the turnbuckle, then into Romero, and then onto Romero, which I liked. He comes up with some fun stuff. But, yeah, I'd say this match just, I don't know, it didn't get all the way there for me. And if this is the end of the feud between the Resilience and the No Remorse Corps, it was kind of a whimper way to end it for me.
Yeah. Although this is a match where if you want to see Davey Richards on all fours raising his leg like he's a dog pissing on Matt Cross, I don't know if you can find that in any other match. So if you want that, this is a 5-star match. So
yes.
On why this tip existed, Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, Matt Cross was pinned since he's going to Japan for Pro Wrestling Noah, doing a gimmick as a masked junior heavyweight high flyer. Cross will probably be back in late December for a final battle. So I'll note, I looked this up just to make sure. Cross does work a tour for Noah as a masked wrestler named Raptor, but that's all the way in May of 2008. So I don't know, like, if that fell through or what, because he does come back for Final Battle weekend, and then after that, he works one January show for ROH, and then he's done with the company. So he's almost done here. So this was, you could say, this stipulation is because, he's going to Noah, but it was, I think, even more than that, a sign of ROH was just about ready to say, we're done with this experiment. And, after the match, Romero and Richards attacked Stevens some more. They put his arm against the ring post and hit it with a chair. Richards then put Stevens in a Kimura for a long time without letting it go before he eventually does. And I just wrote my notes, why the fuck didn't Austin Aries help him?
I wrote that too.
Yeah, and after the match, the ref and an ROH staffer check on Stevens, who is groaning in pain. People have to help Cross to the back as the crowd gives him a round of applause. Again, no Aries, as his two stablemates are completely beat to shit and have to be helped by people to the back. Like,
yeah, what a shitty leader.
Yeah, exactly. So this was done to give Stevens a storyline injury so he could miss the next 4 shows. One wonders at this moment why they couldn't have just changed the stip so both members of the losing team were here for some amount of time. Except it couldn't have been, I guess, 60 days, because if you want Stevens to come back in late November, early December like he does, he would have need to make the stip number 40 something. It would have been a weird number. So basically they didn't want. It's really weird to have a stipulation match where it's emphasized that only one person will be missing time, and then after the match you immediately shoot an angle so that wrestler's partner also misses almost the same amount of time. Just a bizarre circumstance that happened here. But,
it's Dave was praising the booking on this night, but the booking was not very good. I feel like on this particular show in most ways.
And that brings us to the final match on the show, the main event.
Speaking of booking,
Yeah, and if I would imagine if you were going to buy the DVD version, this was the thing that would have gotten you to spring for the DVD version above the pay-per-view. An anything goes match. Necro Butcher defeated Jay Briscoe via pinfall in 21 minutes 42 seconds after a backbreaker on 2 open chairs set back to back. We saw a shorter version of this match the night before. We got round 2 the very next night here. They got a lot of time. What did you think about this match?
I remembered being live for this match and just, I don't know, maybe burned out from the show, just not really being into it. So it's an expectations game. I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I remembered. I think part of it is like these kinds of matches, a lot of how I take it has to do with how the crowd is reacting. And the crowd, they had the crowd for this. Like the crowd, like they weren't like electric or anything, but they were into this match. And so like when they were brawling through the crowd almost immediately, the crowd was into that. Necro hits a very scary looking headbutt on Jay, and he's busted open very quickly. I don't know if it was an intentional hard way or if he also bladed, but he bleeds a lot during this match. It feels like he blades himself multiple times. And I don't remember where I was standing during this brawl, but I know it was not near Necro Butcher because I got to tell you, Trevor, I am not the sort of fan that thinks it's cool to get a wrestler's blood on him or a bloody piece of clothing from a wrestler. I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't want to touch anybody else's blood.
I got a wrestler's blood on my shoe on the first show I ever went to. I thought it was kind of cool. I don't know. I will say we saw a recent Ring of Honor show where someone's head got whipped as they were bleeding, and a fan got like sprayed with blood in the face. I wouldn't want to be that fan.
Yeah.
That's where I draw the line, not in the face.
Yeah, but he was bleeding a lot in the crowd, like on the floor of the arena. It feels like it shouldn't be allowed, but they some classic crowd brawl spots like Necro attacking Jay with the Section D sign, which predictably starts a Section D chant, and back in the ring, we get Jay leaping over the top to sunset bomb Necro off the apron, which was a wild spot. And honestly, as fun as this match was, I feel like at any point during this time, if the match had ended, we would have said this was like a really cool, fast-paced brawl. But it continued to not end. Jay starts throwing chairs into the ring, and some fans start throwing chairs, and we hear someone, and I'm not sure if it's Jay, but it sort of sounded like him going like, hell no, who threw that fucking chair? Like, I was like, are we trying to make sure that we don't get another chair riot? Makes sense. Instead, Jay just has fans hand him the chairs and throws them in. So there's still a lot of chairs in the ring. So it's not quite a proper chair riot, but they still get to do a lot of spots on chairs. Necro does that atomic drop thing over the back of the chair like he did the previous night, while continuing to bleed a ton. Tiger driving Jay on a pile of chairs, which I think is actually the first 2 count in the whole match. There's a spot where Necro actually does an airplane spin and then drops Jay with a Death Valley driver for a 2 count, which I think was the most interesting airplane spin I've ever seen. We get a "This is awesome" chant at that point. There's a spot where Necro does a Rana off the top rope and he slips it first, but then he hits it and they both fall into a pile of chairs. There's a spot where Necro then follows with a high cross body for 2. So it's like in the middle of this crazy brawl, Necro is just deciding, you know what, I'm also going to show off my wrestling skills here. And it kind of looks good. And so it's funny, at this point while I'm watching, I typed the note, amazingly, the crowd has not chanted that they want tables yet. And literally the second I typed the period on that sentence, Jay goes out, grabs the timekeeper's table, and the crowd starts chanting, table, table. So we get almost very quickly, instead of teasing the table, Jay Death Valley drivers Necro off the apron through the table, but really, like, it's Jay's feet that crashed through the table, so Necro basically just bumped on the floor. Still a wild looking spot. I feel like at that point the match could have stopped multiple times, maybe been a little better, but it kept going. They got more near falls. Necro comes back with a flurry of punches and hits Jay with what looks like a full-on knockout punch and asks the ref to count him down. He gets back up, gets some more punches. Then Jay punches Necro,
And this is where the booking comes in and turns this from a fun brawl into some bullshit. The lights go out and stupid Prazak goes, power outage? Because the announcers have to be dumb. This is mostly what I remember from the live experience, which is just seeing the lights go on the entranceway, and we get Jimmy Jacobs, Tyler Black, and Lacey appearing with Mark, and Mark is basically taped to some board, with his mouth covered in tape, his wrists taped up, and he's completely wrapped in barbed wire, and he's bleeding. And this, for some odd reason, distracts Jay, which allows Necro to attack and backbreaker him across the backs of two chairs, which is too insane a spot to do when the audience is completely distracted by some weird angle on the stage, I would say. And he gets the win with that. And I would say this would have been a great finish in 1999 WWF or 1996 ECW, but for any era of ROH, not so much. I'm torn because this match felt like a war, and I really did have fun watching it, but the finish killed it. And I also think it would have been better if it ended earlier anyway. It never got bad or dead, but the totality, I would say, was less than the sum of its parts. But still, both wrestlers definitely worked their asses off, took big bumps. It was definitely never boring. So, good job from the wrestlers, but I'd say overall, it didn't amount to what it should have amounted to because of all the extra stuff.
Can I say one of my favorite Matt Feuerstein podcast moments of the year is now Matt Feuerstein, one of the nicer people you'll meet, saying, "Stupid Prazak went power outage."
Well, I'm not.
Taste in your voice.
Well, I'm not actually calling Dave Prazak stupid. You see, I'm saying that the booking is making him have to act stupid. It's what I'm saying.
I know. It just was great. As I kick my sound guard. Anyway, Jay Briscoe, I'll start off by saying Jay Briscoe, he came to the ring in a black hoodie, and his face was covered with and he had a face covering that had a skull on it, and the two things combined to make him look like he was cosplaying as La Parka, which greatly amused me.
That's what Morishima should have done to look tough, is where that skull thing.
Exactly, or like some shark teeth.
Yes.
Because I'm not a man, I'm a shark. So Necro's elbow that was all fucked up the night before is really heavily bandaged here. There is no attempt made to so we talked about this earlier, but I want to make clear, there is no attempt made to explain to the DVD viewer why an hour earlier in the show we were told that the Briscoes and the Age of the Fall weren't allowed in the same building together, and now they're having a match against each other. We also have no explanation why Mark Briscoe being kidnapped, which happened at the last show the night before, wasn't mentioned during the pay-per-view portion of the show, and why 24 hours later, Jay Briscoe calmly waited to the end of a long show for his match and didn't confront Jacobs and Black earlier about, I don't know, where the fuck his missing brother was, the one that Jimmy taunted Jay about the night before, saying, and I quote, "Where's your brother?" in a shitty way. Lenny and Prazak during the match do eventually say Mark is conspicuous by his absence, and they wonder if the Age of the Fall still have him, but they don't seem to be nearly as concerned as you maybe should be about a possible kidnapping. I wonder if the Age of the Fall still have him. Do you know what that means? If they took a guy a day before and no one has seen him, I wonder if they still have him. This felt like you were saying, this match the finish would have been good in 1999. This storyline logic felt like it would have been 1999 WWE.
Yeah.
ROH up to this point had generally been a very good promotion, attention to detail, trying to justify things, not perfect, but very good by wrestling standards. And I've gave props over the first few pay-per-views for how he's handled them, airing out of taping order. He booked those first few pay-per-views where if you were watching each ROH show on DVD in the order they happened, like we are, the stories made sense and progressed logically. But if you watched only the pay-per-views every 2 months, they still had an internal logic just between the pay-per-views and a flow between them. And I think Gabe deserves a bunch of credit for that. But this is the first pay-per-view where it feels like he just threw out his hands up in the air and said, fuck it. There's going to be a major angle on the previous night's show that the pay-per-view we tape the next night is going to ignore because this pay-per-view actually won't air until mid-goddamn January. And there's also going to be things said on the pay-per-view that are completely contradicted on the DVD exclusive portion of the show because fuck it, how many people are buying the DVD version and will those fans that are that hardcore really give a shit? And probably not. So, in structure, this is very similar to the match these two had the night before. They start the match by brawling in the crowd for quite a while, and then they make their way to the ring, put a bunch of chairs in and do a bunch of big spots. But this match goes wilder than the first. First, like you mentioned, Necro has a really great blade job or whatever, got him bleeding here. There are points in this match where he has nearly like a full crimson mask, like a legit, like just covered. The crowd brawl, I thought, was less fun than the night before, but maybe I felt that way because I'm seeing it for the second time in a short order here. They had less room to maneuver this night, but that meant they were often brawling with fans almost right on top of them, surrounding them, which was kind of a cool visual. Necro hits Jay, like you said, with the Section D sign. But at the point they got in the ring, I was kind of feeling like, this match is a little less good than the one they had the night before. And then that's when they got stupid in a good way, where Jay starts throwing the chairs into the ring and probably eventually get, I don't know, like 10 to 15 in there. And it was funny because Jay seemed to want the ring to be full of chairs, but ROH has had fans throw chairs before, and that has always tended in this coming to result in fans getting hit in the back of the head by flying chairs. So he was doing it by himself one at a time, and as you mentioned, at least one or two fans seemed to join in and throw one in. And like you said, I literally wrote down the quote because I don't think it was Jay, but I don't know who it was, but you can hear someone, like as you said, saying, I quote, "Who threw that chair? Who threw that fucking chair?" Like someone was really angry that fans got in on this. But that's the problem when you encourage that. People think it's something to do. And then we get the big spots. A couple are repeated from the night before, like the Necro Tiger Driver on a pile of chairs. But we got the new ones, like you mentioned, some of them, the airplane spin into the Death Valley Driver. Necro does a goddamn top rope Rana. I said that I wrote my notes that flying crossbody off the top turnbuckle Necro does. I wrote in my notes simultaneously great and horrible. I thought,
and again, a lot, which is what we talked about in the last show. That's what Necro does: simultaneously great and horrible.
Yeah, Jay, the Death Valley Driver off the ring even through a table. He makes it very safe for Necro, but also in doing that makes it look ridiculous because Jay essentially has Necro on his shoulders in the fireman's carry position, and he jumps from the apron onto the table. The table starts to break under their weight, and only then does he slam Necro down. So really it was less like a Death Valley Driver through a table and more like you jumped and broke a table with your buddy and then did a Death Valley Driver on the shards afterwards. But, I mean, again, a spot like that, how are you going to do it safe? A couple things I'll shout out Necro for here. I thought some of his punches on this night were amazing, even by Necro standards, but that is probably because some of them were likely real punches, I would guess, because Jay's spit was flying at a couple points. And the other thing I liked was Necro dead-weighted and really sold for a long time after a couple spots, including the Death Valley Driver through the table. And at one point during one of those moments, Jay almost gets frustrated. You can see him shout, "Come on, Necro," when Necro won't get up when Jay wants him to. And for all I know, Necro laid down so long at times because maybe he was like legitimately winded or hurt. But I felt like no matter why he did it, it added weight to certain key moments. And in the case of that Death Valley Driver through the table, Necro forcing Jay to take like a minute to get him up and roll him in the ring really helped protect the move when he kicked out of it, which is a point that commentary smartly focused on. Like, oh, maybe he would have gotten that pin if he hadn't taken a minute to get the dead weight of Necro into the ring. The finish is ridiculous, like you said, with the lights going out and all the stuff you talked about. It was also even more ridiculous where Jay is distracted by this, like you said, and Necro hits him with a chair shot to set up the finish, except he wants to hit Jay in the head, but he wants Jay to see it so he can kind of protect himself. So he just waits while Jay is completely distracted until Jay turns around. And then there's like this brief moment of like, hi? Oh. And then he gets hit with the chair. And I would say this whole thing was like a lot of Age of the Fall stuff where it's kind of a cool dramatic visual. It's also really corny and feels ill-fitting for the promotion. it's been interesting to rewatch all this early Age of the Fall stuff with a modern context, because we have now lived through a period of time where Jimmy Jacobs helped with AEW creative, and people blamed him for a lot of ideas, fairly or unfairly. And Jimmy now has had a long career working creative for not just AEW, but WWE, TNA. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time in wrestling we see Jimmy getting quote unquote creative like this, where you've got hacking video into the pay-per-view, and you've got a kidnapping, and for all I know, maybe some of this is Gabe's idea, but we do know from Jimmy's interview with an honorable mention that for the Age of the Fall debut, he wants some kind of magic. So there's reason to suspect that at least some of this is on Jimmy. And
he did do creative stuff with like his character in 2006, but yeah, this is on a much bigger scale here.
Yeah. So overall, I like this maybe a little more. This is a high, very good to me. It's dumb, it's reckless, it's messy, it's brutal, but I also thought it was highly entertaining. Necro at one point threw a chair at Jay as Jay was climbing the turnbuckles, and he hit him right in the groin. I don't know if Necro meant to do that. But again, there's so many spots when I review Necro Butcher matches where I go, I don't know if he meant to do that, but it was cool. Like, more than any other wrestler, like, there are things where I don't know if that was a botch. I don't know if he was hurt, but it worked. You know, he was a magic wrestler in that sense. So after the match, Jimmy says they did this to Mark Briscoe, and they'll do it to all of us. Jimmy screams in an unconscious Mark's face that he is a casualty. Tyler Black screams at him, "Where's your brother?" Jimmy spits in Mark's face and tells him to man up. They walk away and leave Jay on the stage as the crowd chants man up. Jay walks to Mark, and the ROH students help him cut the barbed wire off of Mark. They get some of it cut off and then tilt back the gurney that he's been taped to and start to wheel him backstage in what I would call a strangely anticlimactic finish to the show. And that was the show. Matt, who wins the Mastiff Trophy for Undeniable?
This was tough because there was nobody that stood out as being like so amazing, but everyone was pretty good. So I would say there is one guy that was in 2 matches that I enjoyed watching, and that was Jay Briscoe, and he always works his ass off. And so I feel like he will get the Mastiff Trophy for this show. 2 very entertaining matches in different ways. So you can't really beat that. And then maybe it's a little bit of cheating because it was like not even on the same night, but it was on the show that we watched and reviewed. So
yeah,
the trophy goes to Jay. The trophy goes to Jay.
Let's face it, he probably would have had a match of that quality if Mark hadn't been hurt this night on like the show proper.
For sure.
So, for the show itself, I guess we reviewed the pay-per-view. I would just say, like, I always, with the pay-per-view portion, I try and put myself in, like, even though no one's in this situation today, would I recommend the DVD, or would I just say save some money and just watch the pay-per-view version? I would say there's nothing on the DVD portion was bad, but I would say if you're a big fan of Necro Butcher death matches, it might actually be worth going out of your way to buy the DVD, but otherwise, this would have been a show I would have told people just to watch the pay-per-view.
But you know, I would say, like, because the pay-per-view was less good than the other pay-per-views, I feel like the post pay-per-view stuff is a bigger added value than it was in Man Up. And it's certainly a bigger added value than it was for Respect is Earned.
That's a good point. It does make the show feel more substantial, and this is a show that needs that. So that's a good point, because these are all 3 long matches. I thought 2 of them were at least. I thought one was good, one was very good, and even the worst of them I thought was okay.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah, it was certainly didn't have anything the caliber of like Bryan Danielson versus Kenta, but compared for the other ones, I would say that this is a meatier, like, DVD extras section than we've gotten recently. So
yeah,
in that sense, it was good.
So plugs for the show through the years at gmail.com, ThROH, at Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter for Matt. We're also on Blue Sky under the similar names. You'll find them, I'm sure, if you need to. Next time on the show, we will be covering the first half of ROH's ill-fated first-ever excursion to California. This next show won't be the one where we really get into how insane the convention they went to that screwed them over was, but we will be going to ROH's Las Vegas debut for Survival of the Fittest 2007. Like I said before, this is going to be one of the more, I think, sparsely attended Ring of Honor shows in their history. Nigel and Danielson do wrestle on that show, and it's the Survival of the Fittest tournament, so it is what it is. What a great way for me to hype up the show. So until then, till next time, have a good time, have a great time.